Hey there, Smite fans, Aggro here. Look, every single year, the SPL just keeps getting better. Season 7 was incredible, and in Season 8, I'm sure our players are going to take their game to the next level. But in order to do that, they're going to need the best gear they can get their hands on. And that's why I'm so excited to announce the title sponsor for Season 8 of the SPL is Alienware. Yeah, that Alienware. Our players are getting the best of the best in computer gaming. These Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition PC setups are insane. Not only will these be the PCs that the players will compete on once we are in studio, but Alienware is also providing one for each player at their home setup to make sure their practice is as good as possible. Now let's get down to brass tacks. The specs on these Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition desktops are amazing. An AMD Ryzen 9 16-core processor.
That's a lot of cores.
That's plenty of processing power.
That's plenty of cores.
If you want to stream, this is the way to go.
I know a lot about my cores, so. I mean, Pilates, right?
64 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM.
What? Is that true?
That is true.
I mean, this thing has 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM.
Which you can do literally anything with.
Literally anything.
I've never had more than 16 gigs.
That's quadruple the amount I have at home.
And one of the hottest commodities in the PC world, an NVIDIA GeForce 3090 graphics card.
Insane how much better this is than what I have.
The best graphics you really need, Ultra, of course.
Content's gonna look good.
What's the point of all the power if you can't see it? Players will also be using the Alienware 25-inch 240Hz monitors.
Man, when I load into scrims with this bad boy, I'm gonna feed so hard. And it's gonna be in perfect picture quality.
We are so excited to be partnering with Alienware for Season 8 of the SMITE Pro League. And the best part is, this VIP treatment, it's not just for the pros. You too can get the best possible SMITE experience. Just go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code SMITEAW to get special discounts on some of Alienware's best products. Thanks again to Alienware. Make sure you're following them on Twitter and Instagram. That's at Alienware on both platforms. And you can join their community at alienwarearena.com.
And you're telling me an alien wore this?
Hello everybody and welcome to Split 2 Week 1 of the SPL powered by Alienware. And not only that, but the SMITE Pro League Alienware features are not exclusive to the pros alone. Keep in mind that you guys at home can even jump in for a giveaway for some of these primo Alienware monitors. That's 240 hertz of gaming that could be all yours. 5 of them will be given away. The winners can be selected by simply visiting the pinned tweet on the SMITE Pro Twitter, or you can use ! giveaway in chat for the entry link. And this is open only to those in US and Canada, so bear that in mind. But for you US and Canadian folks, make sure that you hop in on that giveaway. It's going to be closing July 13th, so sooner the better. But once your entry is in, you are all set to go. And speaking of set to go, my name's Best Taco, and today I'll be your host. Joining me will be Mifflin. And Mifflin, we've got some pretty banger sets happening here today. What do you think is going to be the most exciting part for you?
It's got to be this Tartarus Titans versus Kings matchup. I got to the point, I said it yesterday at the end of the day that I thought this was going to be the best set of the week so far. Well, so far. It's the last day of the week, unfortunately. We don't have too much more SMITE Pro League this time around, but I am incredibly excited for this one. Tartarus Titans on the upswing, and the Camelot Kings have been my favorite dark horse, I guess is the best way to word it. I think that they really do have the potential to break into that top 2, top 3 slot. It's just that We really need to see him do it.
I'm glad you mentioned that first set for today, but that's not the only set that we're going to have featured for you guys here on the schedule. We've actually got Jade Dragons up against the Solar Scarabs after this Tartarus Titans Camelot King set, and both of these are bound to be some interesting matchups, Mifflin, especially when you factor in that Jade Dragons, Solar Scarabs, that could really go either way based on history.
Based on history, the matchup history, sure, but the Solar Scarabs are still not the favorites coming in this one. Jade Dragons being your favorites, used to be Ghost Gaming, headed up by PBM. These guys have been completely dominant on the battleground of the gods, and I'm not expecting much difference here.
Especially given that with the Jade Dragons having been the playoffs winner of Split 1, you have to expect that they're going to be keeping a lot of that same aggression that found them that victory title, but first set of the day, Tartarus Titans with the Camelot Kings. That's going to be our focus here. And more importantly, I think for the Kings, they've had a little bit of a rocky road, Mifflin. What do you think needs to be the difference maker for them to find that consistency against the Kings?
Just keep playing around your side lanes. When the Tartarus Titans are emphasizing Cyclone Spin, when they're facilitating Benji, they look to be at their absolute best. You have to know that Paul can do literally anything on his own, so even at times when he is left alone, somehow still pulling a 2-3 level lead, somehow finding these solo kills, finding these opportunities, and rotating to the side lanes themselves. At times, I've described Paul as the best jungler in the mid lane because he is that consistently involved in these side lanes.
And it seems as if he can play it all. We even got to see a little bit of that hell action taking place from yesterday's set, and Moronic probably not too happy with having to deal with the burst that's coming out of Paul there. But you mentioned consistency for Paul Mifflin, and what do you think helps him to really achieve that throughout each set?
I just gotta imagine he grinds the game a ton when he's not playing ranked Conquest, which is the majority of the time. I feel like every time I queue into it, he's out there ruining my games, just absolutely dominating me, but he's out there playing duel as well. I've heard from his coach that he's a complete grinder. Cherio obviously going to make sure his squad is on point at all times. It's hard to say, man. Maybe he just drinks different water from us because this guy doesn't look human at times.
Do you think that playoffs performance from the Tartarus Titans was an indicator of Paul maybe not necessarily getting the help that he needed in that mid lane position, or where do you think things kind of fell short for them there?
At times, it feels like the Tartarus Titans don't really have an identity for their drafts. Occasionally, we'll see them come into matches and just have a bunch of really good gods, but gods that don't necessarily synergize together. So if anything, I'd say P's and B's have been the major limiting factor for this team. And then occasionally we'll see Scary D have a little bit of an iffy performance out of the jungle, but got to give him some leeway. First year in that role. Obviously, he's made great strides already. Look, don't worry if you're a Tartarus Titans fan. These guys are going to be just fine.
Well, speaking of which, we actually get to pick the brain of Paul himself right before this set really breaks off. And Paul, first things first, it's been a little bit since we've seen you guys out of the playoffs. How have things been in the downtime for the team?
Good. You know, we're just chilling, thinking about how we lost and stuff like that, and yeah, just chilling out.
Where do you think that the kind of downfall sort of happened for the team during playoffs? Like, were there obvious things that you guys wanted to work on to bring here for Split 2?
Yeah, I don't know. We're kind of discombobulated a bit. So we're definitely still trying to work on our team synergy a bit. And yeah, we talked about it, and hopefully for Phase 2 we'll be a little bit more connected.
And that connectivity, it's definitely hard to find as a mid laner, especially with such a newer jungle piece. But Scary, having been a veteran member, how's it feeling for you after you've experienced one split already with him as the jungle?
Phase 1 went, you know, it was okay at sometimes, but it also went pretty at sometimes as well. So like I said, Phase 2, we're looking to be a bit stronger.
Well, I know you might be used to these being a little bit short and sweet, but Paul, I actually have some more questions I want to ask you about,
Sure.
And largely concerning, I mean, you're one of the most flexible mid laners, I would say, when it comes to your god pool. What do you think has been the number one thing to help you get there?
I don't know. I don't know. I guess I don't. I'm not sure to answer the question.
Are you flexible now? I mean, I don't know. You're starting to make me second guess things. I got excited when I saw you finally busting out the hell yesterday's set. So, I guess
Well,
is it still a healer meta at the very least? Do you think that
No.
healers still have reign?
Well, healers you can definitely still play healers, but I wouldn't say they're not nearly as good with like anti-heal items and then the not brawling mechanic. They're definitely nowhere near as good as they were, but they're still decent.
Well, whether it's the hell or something else out of the Paul Puddle, since that's what we're working with now, apparently. Either way, looking forward to seeing how your team performs throughout this first set, and best of luck with the matches going forward, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Interesting stuff there from Paul, though. I've always felt like he was a relatively flexible mid laner, Mifflin. Maybe you've got otherwise to say here, but Paul's always struck me as somebody that definitely had that variety factor to him.
Look, we could say Paul's just a humble guy, right? Doesn't want to sing his own praises too much, doesn't know if he's flexible, sure, bud. You have some of the most diverse god pool out of the mid lane right now here in Season 8, but we'll go ahead and say it's a puddle for now, just to make sure he's not getting too big a head on his shoulders.
That's fair enough, but hey, on the other side of the opposition, you have to remember what Big Man Tings has been providing for us out of these Camelot King sets. He has been a very consistent factor despite having to deal with some ping inconsistencies throughout the duration of this season so far. And Mifflin, gotta ask it right off the bat, how many sparks are we expecting to see fly in this mid lane?
Well, these two mid laners have interesting styles insofar as they don't really look for the 1v1s too often. It really does come down to, are we fighting? All right, well, I guess the junglers are here. It's a 2v2 or potentially a 3v3 once the supports rotate out. I think it's going to come down to, between these two players, Paul and Big Man Tings, who's got their rotations on deck more, who's ready to facilitate the rest of the map, who's going over towards these side lanes and making their presence known throughout the early, because that's what we've seen consistently from both of these guys. Big Man Tings likes playing gods like this Agni on screen, the Raijin as well, these aggressive early game picks, and he just really synergizes well with their jungler Captain Twig.
What strikes me the most about Big Man Tings is that he really seems like a mid laner that is all for the team fight itself. You don't ever really catch him looking for those specific 1v1 engages, and I guess the big thing here, Mifflin, is Paul kind of touched on it in the interview where he said that the Tartarus Titans at times could be a little discombobulated. Do you think that that's something that the Camelot Kings could potentially be looking to punish here today?
I mean, that's the main weakness of the Tartarus Titans, right? I think everyone's trying to put them on the back foot here a little bit. The Camelot Kings, though, have had a very interesting trajectory throughout this entire year. You bring up the fact that the Tartarus Titans have been struggling a little bit to synergize the Voltron up, if you would. The Camelot Kings are essentially a brand new roster here in Season 8, and they have come together so wonderfully and so quickly that it's an interesting dichotomy that this one team of superstar, star-studded roster inside the Tartarus Titans have been struggling to find that synergy, whereas at the beginning of the year, some of the fans at home, the Redditors, if you would, have said the Camelot Kings are that kind of B-grade squad, some of these star-studded role players, if you would, but they've really come together. The sum of the parts is greater than the whole, or however that expression goes. I need Goremizer to help me out with that one. But they are so good as a unit that I think it elevates their play beyond any individual piece of this team.
Well, I think what also helps to elevate some of these teams' play is the fact that it's a simple motto. Look good, feel good, play good. And one way that these teams make sure to look good is by rocking those jerseys and that Camelot Kings, Tartarus Titans apparel. If you're a fan back at home and want to support either of those teams or any of these teams that we have in the league, make sure to check out shop.smiteproleague.com. A lot of fresh new gear just hit the market. You can peep the Jade Dragon's little arm sleeves. Valkyrie's got that onesie game going on. A lot of pretty tough new apparel that I think would make anybody's gameplay, at least you feel better while you're rocking the cool gear.
Are you willing to say that if they buy the gear, anyone, I'm talking directly to chat here, anyone in chat who buys this gear can go up at least 2 tiers in ranked?
Yeah, if you close your eyes. You don't have to look at the division, just like,
okay, yeah, so
that counts.
Yeah, don't fact check it, just respect it. If you buy the gear, you are going to get at least 1,000 more MMR. That is the best taco guarantee.
I'm glad that I'm the one that's willing to sign off on this, but I'll put my name on that. That's fair to say. We all like to close our eyes when looking at our ranks from time to time, but
me especially.
That's something that I don't expect any of these pros to be doing here today. And another thing that's important to bring up here, Mifflin, you have to remember the Camelot Kings, they were just shy of the playoffs that took place for Split 1. And when you factor that in here today, you have to imagine that this is a team that is hungry to showcase. They should have never missed it in the first place.
No, they had plenty of time rather to wind up, gear up, get ready, study these teams, figure out what's going on in the playoffs to evaluate how they're going to approach this first week. I'm excited to see the Camelot Kings. I've been saying for a long time they deserve to be in the playoffs. They've been an incredibly consistent team this year. I think they're going to prove it here today.
And how relevant do you think some of those playoff compositions that we saw out of the Tartarus Titans are going to be for this set today? Because I know it's not on the new patch just yet, but have to imagine a lot of the drafting could potentially look similar?
Well, if we're going to go off yesterday as any indicator, the Tartarus Titans have thrown away their playoffs drafts completely and instead have leaned a little bit more so into those not really, I'm air quoting, you can't see it right now, Chad, but I'm air quoting, not really meta healers. Well, it could have fooled me, the Tartarus Titans taking 2 or 3 of them in every draft.
2 or 3 of them, that's going to be the gameplay here. But Titans and Kings have to imagine that there could be a potential support focus coming through, and Aurora seeming to be locked in and focused. Amir, the first ban, and why do you think Amir's still remaining such a prevalent ban for these teams?
Just in Season 8, the jungle lanes being so narrow means that those walls are going to consistently lock at least one person down. The buffs to Ymir in Season 8 being able to remove the wall whenever you want to get that cooldown back, as well as Shards of Ice being a channeled ability that now explodes no matter what, even if you die while you're channeling it. Ymir is just a very strong god here in his early game. Is almost bar none one of the best Guardians inside the match. He just dominates with that Frostbite passive, clears waves, kills gods, whatever you really need.
Definitely seems like early game is the initiative to take away here for the Titans as they choose to further remove Fenrir. But the response of Gilgamesh Tiamat just makes sense. Getting a lot of flex picks is what it seems to be off the board early on. And Mifflin, do you think that there's some potential that we see early King Arthur or Kakolin lock-ins if these drafts continue to remain ban focused around jungle, mid, and support?
Well, it feels like King Arthur's almost fallen by the wayside a little bit here in the SPL. A lot of teams are waiting till that second phase of picks, or after the second phase of bans, rather, to go towards their soul laners. I don't necessarily agree with it personally. I think King Arthur is still an incredibly strong god, utilizes Bluestone really well, but I wouldn't be overly surprised if we see a little bit more mid lane emphasis. Already, Raigen's still available unless the Kings decide to take it towards their last ban. Both mid laners really do have a lot of good matches on that pick. Might as well try and take it for yourself.
Chiron could be another appealing pick here for the Tartarus Titans. We know that Cyclone certainly loves his fair share of Chiron, but instead it will be the Emoja, and right off the bat, seems as though the Tartarus Titans are trying to establish that they want the team fight to be in their favor.
Yeah, the team fight as well as that lane pressure out of the long lane going to be largely favoring them depending on what they match up with that Umoja in the Hunter role. But again, we get to harken back to Paul's interview. Yeah, healer is not all that good. Could have fooled me. We take it first pick 3 games in a row now.
He thought that the Kings were listening to the interview in advance, so they're like, oh, okay, buddy, we'll go ahead and still take away that hell regardless. But it does leave Paul open for the Raijin. Granted, Soul still up for grabs. Not sure how likely it is that we see that go to the Tartarus Titans for Paul in the mid lane, but there is some potential, I think, for carries to continue remaining as the focus. And Kings, they're not going to give Cyclone the chance. They'll just take the Chiron for themselves. But do you think this could pose some issues when dealing with that River's Rebuke out of the Emoja?
Yeah, you're going to have to maybe pick up a Phantom or something along those lines, but Chiron's early game is so strong with this new Bluestone Transcendence build that likely we're going to see the Kings just try and utilize Netrioi to blow out this Umoja. Don't let her get involved. Don't let her get that ultimate available. Look for that first blood on second wave that we've seen so consistently out of these hunters.
Persephone? Well, no, excuse me. It's going to be the Soul. Should have gone with the gut. That was the hunch from the get-go. But the Loki pickup, Mifflin, that is an interesting mid-jungle dynamic. If this is a Loki intended for Scary D, what are your thoughts on this?
It's going to have decent early game lockdown. You're able to, the second you get Assassinate available to you, set up for that Supernova from Soul. But the one thing I'm concerned about already with this Titans draft is, where's the front line? Yeah, Umoja's going to build tanky. She's not necessarily a frontliner. Scary D, if it is going to be this Loki for him, is likely going to have to go very assassin focused with this build, wants to find that one-shot potential, beat onto Raijin or Chiron. There's not really much separation for this Soul. And if this Soul is going towards mid, we can still say it's operating as a little bit of a flex pick here. Doesn't necessarily have to go towards Paul. Could head over into the Hunter role. You're still lacking a lot of that separation. You need to get something out there, something tanky to make it a little bit easier for these backliners to operate.
And do you expect that Terra to give some issues towards that Loki Soul dynamic in the mid lane? Because she does have a decent amount of that lockdown potential that you were kind of hoping that the Titans would look to bring more into their draft. But Terra's ultimate, I think, is the main thing to keep in mind here. All of those procs that are going to be available throughout that Loki burst focus. Is that an issue for single target damage?
It really is. This Terra is one of the best counter-engage gods in the game. When you think of counter-engage supports, it's Geb, it's Terra. Occasionally you think of Sobek as well. But let's talk about how this engage is going to look for the Tartarus Titans. If Scary D is piloting the Loki, goes in with the first ability, applies a dot, that's going to instantly proc the heal from Terra's ultimate, making it so much harder for him to finish off these kills. And Loki is generally an all-in god. You use that Assassinate, well, you're in the fight, and you're going to have everyone turning to look at you. The Camelot Kings have got a pretty beefy frontline set up for them.
Yeah, that Hercules pick being added right on top of everything else. Granted, the Hercules could maybe struggle up against the Yamoja with those Riptides. If she's able to have great placements, then she could prevent some of that initiation factor possibly from the Earthbreaker out of the Hercules.
She could, but how many times is it going to be up to this Yamoja ultimate to be that sole separation for their team? If the Tartarus Titans aren't able to get a little bit better engage on their side, they're going to have to look for a pretty sizable early game lead to make this composition work. I'm talking 5,000, 6,000 gold 20 minutes in, pulling gold Furies throughout the early game. Sun Wukong does fill that role a little bit, but even then, it's a little bit CC light, isn't it? It's a slow from Master's Will, potentially a knock-up or a stun from the 72 transformations. He's going to have a lot of his work cut out for him if he's trying to shut down this Raijin.
It seems a bit like a all-or-nothing sort of composition from the Tartarus Titans. They're not really giving themselves much wiggle room if that initial team fight doesn't go their way. Do you expect them to encounter some problems if they're not able to find that pick immediately?
It could be a little bit tough. They're not even winning necessarily in the sustain war either. Yamoja sure has great healing, but so does Terra, Hercules, and Chiron. Even if this Camazots get locked in, it's not. It's actually the Daji. That's just more CC to set up for their boys, but it's going to be tough going for the Tartarus Titans. If they pull a lead in the early, this is a composition that can absolutely bulldoze the opposition. They can completely blow them out if they are able to set up that first blood and then transition into consistent buff invades to neutral objectives. But if they come into the late game from even, I like the Camelot Kings draft a lot more.
Well, I understand that you're leaning towards the Camelot Kings draft a little bit already. Honestly, I probably am a little bit myself, but I have to ask you, Mifflin, do you think, or who do you think should be the primary target focus for the Tartarus Titans here with this given composition in order for them to try and pull ahead early?
There's two opportunities. If you're able to separate the fight, try and shut down that Daji as early as possible. That Palau is going to be such an annoying tool to deal with for the Tartarus Titans. Outside of that, if you're going to engagement a true 5v5, it's a bit of a non-answer, but you're looking to shut down the mid laner. Raijin should be the target more often than not. Taiko Drums does so much damage, the Raiju as well. We want to separate that entire engagement. You want to make sure he isn't able to get those ability rotations off.
Well, as far as the 1v1 is concerned, how does Raijin even fare against Sol in the first place?
That's fine. I mean, Raijin should have the advantage throughout the early game. Thunderclap setting up for your jungler, obviously going to lock down the enemy mid laner pretty easily around level 2, level 3, but once Sol has a couple levels under her belt, has the boots as well, should be able to use that to separate to just at least remain safe in the mid lane.
It is interesting, though, that the Chiron does negate a little bit of that crowd control out of the Tartarus Titans. Giddy Up, a relatively effective tool for getting away from Yamoja's Riptides. He can just charge right through that ability. Not to mention, Sol does have that mild knockup on the Supernova. Not going to really be as impactful against a Chiron because it can no longer catch him out of that dash. So some potential here, I think, for the Kings dual lane to really jump out from the start here.
Loki also going to have a hard time dealing with anyone as long as this Chiron's around. Training Exercise invalidates Assassinate as an ability. That stun should almost never work, I'm thinking, if they're playing heads up around that cooldown. It's a tough one, man. The more I look at this Tartarus Titans draft, the more I'm like, oh, how are you going to be able to navigate these late game team fights? It's really going to come down to this Sun Wukong and how well he's able to dive.
And we've talked enough about the Chiron and the Sol matchups, but as far as Danzaburu is concerned, Danza against Hercules and Terra and even the Raijin, there's a lot of interrupts, a lot of burst there just from the front line alone, Mifflin. How do you expect Cyclone to really fare with this pick?
If he pulls ahead like all Danza burrows, he's going to decimate the opposition. That ultimate to close gap is so great. If you're able to use it aggressively, ride the rocket in and find kills, it means you're probably already winning pretty hard. But Danzaburow's the god of winning harder. You're an ADC main, Taco. How do you feel about this god in general? I'm not a big Danzaburo fan.
It definitely works. He has a lot more viability at the competitive level of play because he does rely pretty heavily, I think, upon having that consistent frontline factor going for him. But when that front line is Sun Wukong and Yemoja, it's a little bit more pressure, I think, on the Hunter to just have that all-in follow-up because they need to make sure that they find those picks consistently. You don't want to allow this dodgy especially to reach that mid to late game stride.
No, and if this Danzaburo does fall behind up against this Camelot Kings draft, well, his ultimate being one of his best escape tools is also incredibly easy to counter. Just stand in front of him. Well, who wants to stand in front of a rocket? Oh, I'm thinking Terra, maybe Hercules, even this Daji if she's ahead as well. It's going to be very hard for Danzaburo to escape once he gets collapsed on inside of his own backline. So it's going to be up to this Yemoja to create a little bit of space for him again, but tough task, man. This front line is lacking in this draft.
Definitely a high execution composition for the Tartarus Titans, but we'll get a chance to see how it shakes up against the Camelot Kings because we've got Aggro and Gore joining us for the cast. You guys do your thing.
Thank you, Taco. That's right. It's Aggro and Gore, and we are here to chew bubblegum and cast Game 1 between the Tartarus Titans and the Camelot Kings. And Gore, I've got bad news.
We're not allowed to chew bubblegum on mic.
No, we are.
It sounds bad, audibly.
But we're all out. We're all out of bubblegum. So all we can do.
You know, we actually don't have any in the break room. We used to
right.
keep that stocked up.
We used to, but we're all out. So we've got no choice but to cast this game. But I'm not too upset about that because I think this is setting up to be a really, really good match. The Tartarus Titans yesterday looked very good in their return and start of Phase 2, but the Camelot Kings are the team that everyone's looking to bounce back after not making it out of the group stages at Phase 1.
Yeah, a very, I want to say peculiar. I mean, they didn't show up in a set that everyone kind of thought they were going to be able to control there up against the Scarabs. So I want to say good on the Scarabs for being, I want to say king killers in this case, because not only did they eliminate the Kings, but specifically the way they've been able to take it to some of the top teams, even if they weren't necessarily successful even from what we saw yesterday. But I do have a lot of hopes for this team. I mean, they are the ones that maybe surprised me the most. I think coming out of this year, I didn't expect to see them doing what they were doing until Phase 3 at the earliest, and they were able to do it there in Phase 1. And that makes things a little more difficult for the Titans, but they got that warm-up yesterday. Granted, their draft, as the desk kind of put it, isn't necessarily doing them favors. This is something that I think they could handle pretty well.
Something a little bit different for the Titans for sure. Paul on the Soul is not the usual suspect for him in the mid lane, but just a couple of hell games yesterday ended up being enough to scare the Kings into a hell ban, so I think you see how much respect that pick deserves for Paul. Interested to see how he's going to do on this Soul, but he might have more numbers to deal with than he's expecting. His genetics has made an early rotation over towards the mid lane. That will prevent Paul and Scary from getting those mid harpies, but no kills abound. How do you feel about Paul on this Soul? Because he seems to be, you know, he's dabbled in Morrigan a little bit. He's going for different things in this mid lane. Soul just the most recent addition.
I was going to say the good news is that if you want anything for Paul, you want him to be able to survive. Soul's got a lot of that in her kit, right? Like a lot of self-sustain, but also the literal immunity to everything that allows her to get out of there. So I feel like you're at least making sure that, I would argue, one of your star players, if not maybe the star player, depending on how the draft goes and how this game folds out, is going to be safe. And so I'm excited to be able to see how he handles it. But like you said, it's not as utility-based for him. I mean, like, yes, she has a slow, but you look at Soul, especially even in mid, but whenever, you know, Barra plays her, like, she's a carry. Like, through and through, she's looking for autos. The abilities are very important. We've seen Paul play that style, but it's not necessarily his go-to. And so I think it's going to be an interesting change-up for him. I'm just excited to see how it works out for him.
Hey, man, for those of you who aren't aware of Paul's competitive history and where he came from the duel scene and played a lot of Hou-Yi and Kronos when he first came into the league.
Yeah.
Those are auto attack based. I think that he's going to be just fine piloting the Soul, though he has already changed up the build in comparison to what we see most Souls go for. Most of the time you see them start Tiny Trinket and go for either Bancrofts or Talon or Typhons in that first slot and then go into Spear of the Magus. He's starting off with a ring. A lot of times you don't even see Soul players build rings throughout the entire build. It's much more ability-based. So interested to see where he's going to go with that.
I mean, what, last year was ring central, and because the rings all focus on the attack speed, like, they go for that more Hunter style. And I'm going to be honest, if I see Loki, Soul, especially an attack speed Soul, and a Danzaburo, if they get a Fire Giant, sometimes even if they don't, I don't know how many towers are going to withstand that onslaught. You know, start factoring in things like the Fafnir Coercer and other games, all of a sudden that becomes impossible to deal with. But here, I'm curious to see what Paul's going to be able to do with this, because we saw Ring of Kate when it got its nerf in mid-season of Season 7. everybody, all the magical carries just got dumped. Nobody wanted to deal with them anymore. And it wasn't until specifically an ability-based change for Soul made her better that she started coming through. So now, I mean, Paul's just tantalizing it. He's adding flavor to the pick that already is something we haven't really gotten to see him play. And I'm curious if it's going to be the only ring, what ring it's going to be at that, because there are a few, like, still good options, but not necessarily the ones that you would think of in particular first.
Yeah, I agree. I'd expect it to be Telkines, but after maybe he finishes off Magus, I'm not sure.
It's like I want like another item or two, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's going to be something to keep an eye on for sure as this game goes on. I want to take a look at this solo lane here, Gore, because yesterday Benji really put on a clinic on this Hercules solo lane, and Hercules all of a sudden might be starting to come back into the meta, but in the solo lane instead of in support. Haddix has played it a decent amount so far this year. Benji looked phenomenal on it just yesterday, and now Variety piloting it for the Kings.
Honestly, I think it's just starter items. Like, I was kind of curious as to why he disappeared. I mean, look what he just did to Benji. Like, and this isn't even his full kit. He missed the knockup there. There's more damage waiting for Benji on the receiving end of that if Variety connects with everything. And so I was really curious that he disappeared. I would have expected him, like a Roar PBM, to pick him up and maybe be aggressive. Fenrir has kind of taken that place in the support role to be aggressive, but Hercules is a great frontliner to have. That displacement and the CC he brings, as well as the damage he can bring, is just too difficult to deal with in a lot of these competitive settings. The boulder is just enough that maybe you can't secure that Fire Giant or Gold Fury when he's around. The knock-up and the shove is enough CC that yesterday I think we saw Vamana specifically pushed against the wall too long.
Scary goes in using the ultimate on Captain Twig, but Twig has his ultimate in response. Benji will get pulled, but doesn't panic. Beads and ultimate in his back pocket. No reason to react harshly, and instead we'll just bird form away. But on this left-hand side, Netrioid brawling up against Cyclone Spin, and Cyclone fires off the rocket, but Genetics blinks in order to take the damage for him, and Aurora just needs one last hit in order to get the job done, but the Terra ultimate's enough to keep Netrioid standing, and now he's trying to turn the fight around. Aurora completely out of Omi, but Netrioid doesn't have the ultimate available. Said they need big man Tings and his assistance. Genetics gets a nice stun, forces the beads from Aurora, and the masterful shot just short. A much ado about nothing in the duo lane, but a couple of relics and ultimates traded each side.
I mean, incredibly close, though. Aurora is just maybe a second of deployment off, half a second off of capturing Netrioid there. That's a guaranteed kill if it happens. Almost oversteps, still isn't able to get out of there. And this is where things, I think, are going to be a little more problematic, because the control that the Titans have is built mostly around Aurora. Like, a lot of the CC that Aurora can put out is going to be consistent. Benji a little bit later. Maybe Scary D, but this is going to be risky.
Here he comes. Netrioid in good position. Knows that this could be potential for danger, and Scary D just going to put some damage on Genetics. What a play by Genetics, by the way, to blink in and eat the Danzo rocket to make sure that Netrioid didn't get hit by it. That was the homing variant. Cyclone, of course, did not take it for the ride. And that would have spelled doom for the Hunter for the Camelot Kings, but First Blood denied by the Camelot Kings support.
I think Genetics is like the #1 player we see do that. Like, I feel like every time I think of 6 saves, most of the time it's Genetics doing something that is just a little bit of space creation. Sometimes it's a micrometer on the map that is going to make the difference, but he is the one that's going to be able to do it. And I think that's the heads-up play, and also something that they're only able to afford because the draft from the Titans is so CC light, because they don't have so much to worry about. He's gone Blink. I mean, Aurora, you find yourself in a counter position like that, you've got beats. You're not going to be able to do as much other than try to riptide someone away. And so I think that's where the Kings' distinct advantage is going to come. In these team fights, it's the control all around Aurora. You can knock him down, beat him up, but once he's out of there, I mean, Benji's a threat, but how well you can actually dive the backline is difficult.
Genetics takes a good chunk, but not as much as Scary. Big man Tings goes in, and Tycho drums him down. First blood to the Camelot Kings, and here comes Twig, knowing Aurora's beads are down, but with that River's Rebuke still up and available, Twig will decide to let it go, but first blood still in the King's back pocket.
Now you could get aggressive onto Benji. I don't know how much they're going to be able to do. Everybody else went left. They're over there fighting over mid-Harpies, so you're kind of left out to dry here. But he's still going in, maybe expecting some help. Nobody on the minimap is moving closer. He just thinks he has the 1v1.
Yeah, he thinks he's got the damage, but at least he has the damage enough to force out Somersault Cloud. I don't know if Twig is happy with the trade of Blink for Cloud, but assume he is, as he knew that would likely be the end-all, be-all, as Benji gets some back Harpies and backs up before Variety shows up to punish him. No boulder for Variety, he just used it to clear waves. So not too much kill potential now for this Hercules in the solo lane, but The Kings turn up the Jets a little bit. Netrioid getting aggressive and left. Then it's big man Tings and Genetics in mid, centered around this Terra more often than not.
You know, I'm going to bounce back to something we had mentioned earlier, because the ring does come first. Paul doesn't go for another item prior to finishing it off. I actually really like this idea, though, because and look at the pace of the game, right? It's been 9 minutes, 1 kill that's happened, and it was within the last 2. Like, you aren't really feeling a lot of pressure. I think Paul knows he's going to be able to farm a ton and get items online. It's one of those things where it doesn't necessarily matter what order they happen.
Twig went in with that Trickster Spirit, but doesn't end up getting punished quite yet. Scary D, no stealth for a little bit, comes up right on time. Genetics hunting him, nearly had Scary through the stealth, and that forces out the Assassinate. Beautiful read by Genetics, and just the guesswork ends up working well for him in that moment. And that's before we start to see something like an Erendite come online for Captain Twig to help track that Loki a little bit easier. Of course, it is easier to see him than it used to be, not true stealth anymore, thank goodness, but still pretty hard to see in the midst of a team fight.
The good news is, again, Netroid is a big key factor, right? All of a sudden, Masterful Shot comes through. Hey, cool, you're out of your invis. We know where you are. That makes Scary D's life. It's just so difficult to be a Loki right now. Like, I understand why they've been picking it up, because I mean, we got to see it yesterday. Like, the dichotomy of Loki. One game where he was literally nothing but like no use at all, and one game where he was essential because of the wraparounds that he had. And so I think there's a lot of fun play styles that can come from it. And yeah, I'm sure everyone lamenting, oh, Loki.
Feels so bad
he's
for
not
him.
doing
Man,
so well.
I wish he was so much better so I could play against him more. Everyone feeling sad for the Loki players out there. But I don't think you have to be too worried about it. He's clearly one of the premier assassins in Smite right now. No, he's making it work for sure. And Scary hitting a big power spike by finishing off that Brawler's Beat Stick. Anti-heal a necessity against the Camelot Kings draft. As Paul has gone, I believe, for another ring pickup he has. I feel like Spear of the Magus is a huge reason, in the lifesteal being added to it is a huge reason why Soul has seen a resurgence in the meta, but Paul not going for it, at least through the first 3 items. Gotta imagine this is going to be a demonic grip as Netroid gets bounced back and dashes in aggressively, but no real follow-up as Aurora just had a nicely placed Riptide. Just surprised that Paul is going for another ring. I imagine it's got to be demonic here.
Yeah, I mean, either way, like demonic, I guess he could go hasten, but I don't know why you would want to pick that up so early. Like,
I wouldn't
at all,
Not
even honestly.
Yeah,
but it's just like this weird area where we haven't been seeing this a lot lately. It's a good build for Soul, but it's not something that I expected to see, let alone out of the mid lane. I think that's really where it's losing me. Like, if you were telling me, okay, Cyclone's playing it, he's going for the ring build, I can believe it. Like, you're at least going to try.
And it's because it's a little bit slower, right? You need in mid lane, it's a little bit faster paced. You don't have the time to farm it. Things like quick power spikes like Magus feel a lot better in mid, whereas in ADC, you have the time to build a slower build like the rings.
Yeah, I guess he's getting enough farm right now. He doesn't feel, again, the pace of the game suits it really well. He's not stressed about it because no one's been putting a lot of pressure on him. The glory of Soul as well. You're going to be able to get away, but now you're starting to see the Kings do what the Titans were doing yesterday. More pressure on the buffs, try to strip away. Yes, no Furies, no Pyros have fallen just yet, but they're still accruing. It's only 1,000 gold, about 1,200, but any buff at this point is going to be a big swing because of how things have been going.
Well, Benji almost stole that blue buff away. I guess he got one of the little spirits because Variety did end up picking it up, but it cost him that ultimate in order to do so. Definitely a bit of a slower pace now, but I think the Kings are very pleased with that pacing. You've got a Terra on your team. That screams team fight. You've got a Daji. You're already through the worst part of her game, but you're not outscaling her as an assassin no matter who you are, basically. She is the premier late-game assassin in terms of scaling. So I don't think the Kings are pressed to get the pace a little bit higher. Maybe Cyclone Spin is. He goes in on the Netroid with the rocket, and Netroid will use his ultimate just as a form of CC immunity. Ult for ult. I don't think either Hunter is feeling too worried about it.
Not that bad at all. I mean, you keep beats, everybody's happy. Haven't backed for their Aegis just yet, but the control right now on the map from the Titans is looking a little bit better for them, at least starting up with Gold Fury. But they're going to be spotted out pretty quickly, and Twig's in the neighborhood.
Genetics has his ultimate as well, but Gold Fury's getting low. Terra ultimate popped, and the Titans will secure the Gold Fury. River's Rebuke down to try and separate the fight, but Twig is up and over the giant waves. He nearly kills Aurora. One last tick, and the Trickster Spirit will do it. Twig claims the life of Aurora, but it's at the end of the day, it's the Tartarus Titans who got the Gold Fury.
I mean, they get that a trade as old as time, but always worthwhile. You lose a roar, you're able to come through. The thing I'm most impressed with, and it was a very small detail, but Paul ticked into his immunity just as he would have been pulled. Did not beads, did not Aegis. Like, that is some self-control to know that you're going to be able to get there. They still lose a tower on the back end. Still ultimately worthwhile, but you're about the same distance behind as you were before, right? Like, we all just kind of go through all that to find ourselves in the exact same position we were a couple minutes ago. But ultimately, I think it showcases where the Titans' pressure is going to be and exactly how fast their burn is on objectives. Loki, Soul, Danza, Cyclone Spin, all going to be able to put that damage in one target very quickly. If they get to a Pyromancer, it's going to fall pretty quickly. The same thing for a Fire Giant. And that's where that Boulder comes in. Maybe Raijin. There's not a lot of traditional secure, I guess, is the best way to describe it, that's on the side of either squad right now. That Boulder might be the best one in the game.
Pretty difficult to outpace that as far as physical power scaling goes, but Variety doesn't have a lot of power in the build. He's gotten tank boots into breastplate, and now in a shield of regrowth. Regrowth, of course, still pretty much core on this god, if you ask me, just giving you that extra mobility and extra range in order to land those ever so important pulls. As the Titans have started to group up, they're around this Pyromancer now. But Genetics and Variety here, they've taken a little bit of poke, but of course both have some built-in sustain.
And I can't think of anything, like, that's the most frustrating feeling in the world. You have 3 people in there just smacking down Variety as hard as they can, and he just kind of scoffs at it and walks away. He's back to full HP. Doesn't necessarily matter. I really like seeing this as well, like, specifically from Variety. He was someone that last year, like, was not necessarily hit or miss. Like, he was always consistent. It just wasn't necessarily at the level we've seen this year. And I like seeing this Hercules, especially because of what he can do to displace someone like Paul, Cyclone Spin, or even just stop Scary D from getting to the backline. I'm going to say his rotations are going to be majorly impactful in this game.
Pyro again the focus for the Titans as Paul is swinging. He's finished off his Ring of Hecate. It's not the demonic.
We season 7 again?
Yo, no, we're season 8. We did not roll back the clock for this patch, that's for sure. As Aurora gets picked up, pushed by Variety, and now in a bad spot, stunned by Genetics. And here comes the ultimate coming from Twig. He's already down below half HP, and some good jukes are coming. Aurora will get pulled into the last second. Bede's still down, and that last tick of damage from Variety will get the job done. But Cyclone Spin wants to avenge his longtime teammate, Rockets, right on top of the Hercules, but he is not feeling the worst where, in fact, it's Cyclone who's now in trouble. Great patience coming from Variety, but can't quite find that driving strike. Meanwhile, Loki doing Loki things in the backline, backstabs down Captain Twig.
And as far as Scary D is concerned, he did exactly what his job was. In a one-for-one trade, you killed the jungler, you lost your support. You're going to be riding home about that one. You're very excited, because that's all he ever needs to do. I mean, even now, as long as he can get out alive, which based on the map, no one else is going to be pursuing outside of Genetics. And so you just get your Loki things done. Go in the back line, find the guy that's alone, kill him dead, and then walk out. And whether or not you get away with your life, as long as it's a high-value target like Twig, I think it's always going to be worthwhile. And I expect to see a lot more of that kind of play style from the Titans. Paul and Cyclone very forward pressed to be able to get their damage out and just be the distraction. Hey, look at us. We're shiny. We're doing damage to you right here. Don't look at the fact that you have no clue where Loki is.
Yeah, but here's the thing, is that I don't know how much damage they're really doing to Variety at this point. I mean, Variety ate a Danza rocket, and I don't think he felt it at all. My man's is tanky already. He doesn't even have that many protections quite yet. Just that healing and sustain ends up making a big difference. And no Cursed Ankh on the other side quite yet. I imagine that's where Aurora's going to go once he hits level 12. But until that point,
it's brawlers.
It's brawlers.
And that's it.
That's it. And Paul's not building more damage right now. He's going for either a Spirit Robe or a Mantle of Discord. So those are his options from where he's going from the Cloak of Concentration. I'm a little concerned about the DPS check that the Titans are going to have to pass if they want to beat this Kings in the team fights.
Yeah, they are not going to be hitting. Like, the armor class on the other side is just too high right now. And it's only Variety that we're worried about. Like, that's not even, like, if you can get to Twig, you get to Tings, you get to Netroid, great. And good luck getting to them.
Well, good luck getting away to Cyclone Spin as he is locked in. Aegis really optimistic, to say the least. Netroid finds an easy kill as a big grouping and dive happens from the Titans. Blink Terra Ult is not going to let you survive for very long, especially when Genetics has picked up the Divine Ruin. Variety's here as the Pyromancer gets pulled, and he's going to throw the ball in, but a little bit too late. The Titans are able to claim it, so still get one objective for the cost of Cyclone Spin's life. But look at where Netroid and Genetics are. They never left. They've still pushed down this Tier 2 on the left-hand side. They got Tier 1, Tier 2, and Cyclone Spin and all they lost for it was the Pyromancer.
I mean, they're just doing a good job controlling the map pace right now on the side of the Kings. It's not necessarily worried about losing some of these neutral objectives. I mean, they fought around the Fury and lost it here. Now they're in control of the Oni Fury.
They lost it to Scary D's decoy.
No.
He stealthed in and dropped it down, and you want to talk about agonizing visions.
32 damage. Like, just,
Yeah.
that's such a low number,
That's
aggro.
a very low number that got the job done, but Scary makes a big play. And you feel like the Titans needed it
God,
at that
call
point.
lasses.
Yeah, I mean, you feel like they needed it at this point, don't you? Because the Kings, as you mentioned, they've been the ones pushing the pace the entire match. And all of a sudden, the Titans are able to gain a little bit of momentum. And now that Aurora has this upgraded Ankh, that with a little bit of momentum at their back, maybe the Titans can be the ones pressing forward and going into the future.
Loki decoy steals. I mean, like, it has happened before. And the one, again, I'm thinking of one from, what, now 10 years ago?
Yeah.
At least it feels like it. Maybe it's almost at this point, but geez, that's got to feel bad because those are where you need to start winning the
push
game.
coming from Variety, and Scary D's going to have to use the ultimate and the beads, but Twig is in, and Benji is the focus. Big Man Ting's going to mez him out of the Ox form. That's not quite enough. Aurora's able to lock in Big Man Tings, and he's backed into a corner, but he is taking no damage from Paul's ultimate. Big Man Ting still alive and healthy, but here comes Cyclone to remedy that problem, but it's not quite enough. Cyclone will claim Genetics. Is Scary D going to blink forward? Can't quite close the gap onto Tings, but will get Twig. It'll cost him his life, but Scary happy to make that trade because Benji's going to avenge him. Variety falls, and the Camelot Kings all of a sudden lost 3. Tartarus Titans only lost their jungler.
Finally, some prots coming online here for Variety, but maybe a little bit too late for them to make it a big difference in that fight. He's going to be picking it up, but again, nowhere to be found.
Here comes Netrioid. Fire Giant is pulled, and they don't have great secure. It's down below half HP, and they know he's here. He's going to check it, use the ultimate. DPS stopped, and Paul is low. Masterful shots immune, but the Camelot Kings are going to rip it away. What a play by Netrioid in order to get in there and steal away the Fire Giant, just short of killing the enemy mid laner, but you bet he's got the FG. The basic attack steals it away, and no objective is safe in game 1 between these two squads.
I mean, at this point, that's every neutral objective has gone the way of the Titans, except for the one that I think has mattered the most. Tings is the only person with a Fire Giant buff right now, so I imagine that not a whole lot's going to be happening on that front of at least tower killing. But we'll have to see. I mean, there's only 3 left standing. A tier 1's not too difficult to take down. The Kings have been able to control, again, a lot of this map so far, save for those neutral objectives. And that's just been an insane thing. And again, one that matters the most, where you are able to walk forward and recognize that my life is absolutely worth stealing this. But there's a moment, like it's right after his ult, right here, he decides to go in, and that is like unheard of. Nobody does that. Everyone, they see their ult, they see that they stop DPS, they just fall back because they recognize our steal potential's gone. Netrioid said no,
sir,
and decided to dash forward with that.
Giddy up, baby. Get me in there and let me get that extra power for my auto attacks, and boy, does it pay off. And as you mentioned, it's only Tings who has the Fire Giant, so it's not like the Kings are now in a commanding position, but you kept it from 5 members of the Titans, or 4, I guess, because Scary was dead. So that is the bigger deal. As Twig is here and takes a good chunk, about a third of his HP from Benji, but getting some Monolith healing coming from Genetics. Interested to see which team is really going to be the one to feel confident, because now Netrioid and Big Man Tings relicless coming into this next team fight, but the Kings are the ones now with the wind on their sails. They've got the Fire Giant steal and Big Man Tings with the buff, but not exactly the guy you want to have the Fire Giant buff. The power is nice, but it's not going to help you nearly as much on those objectives.
I mean, ideally, maybe that sustain comes in handy. He was pushed out pretty early during that last fight, so maybe there's something to it there, but at that point, you're grasping at straws, right? You're like, okay, what small detail of a Fire Giant buff can we really pivot here to make it seem worthwhile? Really, the biggest thing that they're going to have going for them is the fact that Netrioid just seems to be absolutely insane. In fact, they're still fighting in Variety. Gets a good push.
Good push, but it's only onto Aurora. Blink in from Benji as he puts, again, good damage down. Paul's ultimate, not quite as much. But Variety blinks in, hello, into the teeth of the team, does not find anything, and Twig with the long-range pull, but Benji's got the beads. Again, a lot of fireworks, a lot of bark, but no bite from either side. No one really even that low, thanks in large part due to the sustain that both sides have.
And I mean, you can see Aurora putting in the work, throwing out those autos. Again, it's a small heal, but it's enough at this point with all the health bars where they are. And Variety, I mean, he keeps eating a lot of damage. Granted, we've seen how that tends to work out for him. He almost always ends up back full health. But it showcases exactly what you were saying. Like, we can sit here and we growl at you outside the tower, look very devastating and menacing. But we really can't withstand that tower right now because we don't actually have the Fire Giant buff that we want. And as such, it's left open neutral objectives. Gold Fury available, Pyro available.
Wow, big man just backed. I mean, Gold Fury just spawned, and the big thing about that last team fight, Gore, is that both Paul and Cyclone lost their beads, and Benji. So now you're just waiting for Captain Twig's ultimate to come back up, and this should be a winning fight for the Camelot Kings. And I think the Tartarus Titans agree, even though they're the ones who had the map advantage, at least short term in terms of vision. They seem to be willing to give it up, and I think they should. Not worth losing the game over a 24-minute Gold Fury. This is not the type of engagement that I don't think you want to take. Variety, again, deep in the enemy backline, but again, not looking too much worse for it. No anti-heal for Paul or Cyclone Spin. Needs that Scary D is really the only one applying that anti-heal, and he's nowhere to be found when it comes to these dives. Push again from Variety as the Kings secure the Gold Fury. And Benji doing some front lining of his own. Where did Captain Twig's health bar go? Paul and Benji doing great work to knock him down, and that will do it. Just a Gold Fury is the answer for the Camelot Kings on what they get on their Fire Giant.
Paul means nothing to Genetics and Variety, right? He hits them and they just scoff at, like, the damage literally means nothing to them. Now, that being said, the backline, they've got a lot more to worry about over there, and I think that's kind of what we're seeing throughout all of that. It's just the pressure, I think, that is going to be able to come through from Paul, from Cyclone. If they can get on the Twig, Tings, Netroid, either way, they're going to be able to create a lot of space. We saw how quickly that health bar disappeared. And admittedly, with Paul's build, that's about all you could hope for at this point, right? Like, you're not looking for pin, you're not necessarily looking for... I guess there's a lot of power in there, at least in terms of attack speed. You can throw it out, get the combo, but...
His auto's hit, and he's doing... I mean, he's second on the player damage charts to Benji, but... It hasn't felt super effective.
Not on the tanks, at least.
No, not on the tanks at the very least. And if Genetics is put a heal down, oh no, he doesn't have Lotus Crown. I just kind of assumed that is such a big item for Terra, but I think he opted in that flex slot for that Divine Ruin instead, doubling up on the anti-heal alongside Big Man Tings. As here we go again. Fire Giant has respawned 5-5 in the kill column. By all accounts,
it's
an even game. Nothing really that either team can hang their hat on. Benji gets pulled in, but he's Wukong. No chance that's going to kill him. As the Titans do end up securing that Pyromancer. Take a look at the builds coming into this really important fight. A lot of starter items completed now. Hero's Axe done for Variety, so if you CC him or CC his teammates around him, they're going to get a big old shield, courtesy of Variety. You got a Pendulum of Ages. Too. Yep, a lot of health for him in the build. Good call. Pendulum of Ages for both mid laners. Bluestone Brooch for Benji. A lot of these starter items starting to get upgraded as we head into this next firefight.
Or in the case of Netroid, completely sold off. I mean, look at his build. He is gone for nothing short of killing Aurora and Benji, it feels like here. I mean, yes, Fire Giant, yes, towers, all that, but if I'm Aurora, if I'm Benji, stepping forward underneath Netroid's eye is going to be very dangerous. And it's still a lot of damage that's going to apply to people like Paul, Cyclone, or Scary, but realistically, these tanks are going to have to be a lot more worried about this Chiron, especially with the peel that he's had. Variety, if he gets a pull onto one of them, it's just going to be easy setup.
Benji, the lone man underneath his tier 1 that does not stand for long. Makes sense the Titans don't want to defend that. Paul is down to about half mana, but with that Pendulum of Ages MP5, that shouldn't be a major problem for him. Maybe if the fight goes long. The Kings not really threatening around this Fire Giant, and that's because they don't have great objective DPS. Chiron without the Brooch gonna have to be kind of hard pressed to get it, but here's a route onto Cyclone Spin, and he is in trouble. Both relics use great wall coming from Genetics as well, as Variety is sitting on top of the Hunter, but Cyclone's got the rocket. That gave him the CC immunity, but it's still not enough. Finally, the Camelot Kings labor to get the enemy ADC down, and it costs them all 5 ultimates in order to do so, but they got him at the end of the day, and that's what matters. Mission accomplished for the Camelot Kings, and they're looking pretty healthy still, but 5 ultimates on cooldown. The Titans use 4. It's just Assassinate up for Scary D.
Not only that, but they burn specifically the Cursed Ankh. A lot of relics done for the duo lane on the side of the Titans, but without Ankh being there, killing off Variety becomes a much more difficult task.
Well, Variety just got a double push onto the front line. See you later to Aurora, but Scary D on the side once again finds the assassin. Captain Twig down, but the rest of the Titans not looking so good. Thunder Crash in from big man Tings, and the dive is good. Paul falls to Variety. How on earth did he have Boulder up again? Use it twice in that team fight, and they needed it both times. Tier 2 tower falls, and Fire Giant be damned. The Tartarus Titans now have to worry about their Titan being under siege, but Scary D has cleared the wave. There is no wave coming here for the Camelot Kings. I think that's going to prevent the end, but it won't prevent this right side Phoenix from falling.
Yesterday we saw them get aggressive in a scenario much like this. I mean, 11 seconds, 10 seconds till Aurora is back, but you've got 20 on the clock before anybody else is here. Luckily, Cyclone Spin and Scary D, that's a big enough threat that I'm not trying to fight under the Titan under it. I actually like this call. Fall back 10 seconds away from getting Twig. You could potentially just fall back straight to the FG if Netroid's still alive with the damage he's able to do. Could have been enough for them to just try and burn it down, get it onto everybody. Still risky at that call, though. Now it's all going to be about vision. I see a bunch of red wards deep for the Kings.
Yeah, but Aurora just saw the whole team of the Camelot Kings back. Maybe they could try and rush this Fire Giant, but it's a risky proposition. I mean, no relics at all for your backline between Paul and Cyclone Spin. Aurora doesn't have his Ankh up, though that is coming shortly. It is up now. They decide not to go for the Fire Giant, instead just trying to get some sort of ward vision. They did only lose the right side Phoenix, the best one to lose if you had to pick one, because it's easier to clear those fire waves and still contest fire. But we'll see if they can do that. Look at where Scary D is. He's pushing mid-wave in order to try and get a flank route in. Fire was pulled for a moment, but it seems like the Kings know they're going to have to fight. Benji is the focus, but Genetics wall does more harm than good for his team. Lets Benji escape a little bit. Seems like we're going to have another Fire Giant dance.
Things get more complicated here. Beads Aegis down for Paul, so he's a little more vulnerable. Beads down specifically for Variety here, although I'm not sure he cares as much, especially when he's pushing in Aurora. They're looking for the fight.
There's a River's Rebuke. Good ultimate from Genetics is on the entirety of the Camelot Kings backline, and Captain Twig is looking for some priority targets, but I don't think he found them. It's only Aurora that gets pulled in, and Scary D's right on top of him once again, but big man Tings has got the backup. He jumps in and nearly saves his life, but now he's actually thrown his own away. Cyclone and Scary down. On the other side, it's Twig, Tings, and Make That Netroid joined in. It's a 2-on-2 as Aurora has fallen as well, and it's Variety and Genetics up against Paul and Benji, and Paul is feeling mighty confident from this position. Not enough damage to take him down from this position, as he's going to start swinging these auto attacks onto Variety. The build finally starting to pay off for him, as a Stellar Burst will slow down Genetics, but I don't think they're going to have the damage, as especially after a good wall and dash coming from Genetics. Pushing from Variety, Paul, I think, may be happy that he got repositioned from here.
I mean, now he's closer to everybody. Granted, you can see how this is going. Smack, smack, smack. Okay, I'm not killing you. You're not killing me. We're both kind of in this awkward position, but Boulders just came back up for Variety. Enough CC, a little bit of damage. All of a sudden, they might be able to do something more. Genetics, I think, forced to ult there, yeah. So unfortunately for them, that's going to be down going into the next team fight. Still looking for Paul, but now Variety's on his own. Like, he's just playing distraction because there's fire minions pouring in over on the other side.
But with Scary D and Aurora respawning, won't actually put any pressure on the Titan. Cyclone has to go clear a wave and left to protect that Phoenix. But overall, a very even fight once again. The Kings maybe overplaying their hand in order to save this dodgy. And Captain Twig, I mean, that was his moment to find a big ultimate. Lots of relics down. I don't know that he forced Paul. Maybe he forced Paul's ultimate with that powwow, but Paul certainly did not have beads and wasn't able to really make him pay. I was going to drop it to you, Gore, but I can't because Fire Giant is back up and ready to go. This Fire Giant dance has lasted longer than McGregor Poirier 3, I'll tell you that much. Fire Giant down below half, and Aurora's going to get pulled back. Immediately a commit after that by the Camelot Kings, and they got it. EFG is in their back pocket, and Aurora hits the eject button, but that's the inject button with the second Riptide. Actually pushed them back in, but the Camelot Kings were not in position to punish. All 5 members of the Camelot Kings EFG'd out of their minds, and they're ready to push as soon as they get reset.
Let's say now Pyro on their side as well. Cool. This is the perfect time to back. You have plenty of time to work with. Finally, someone has some sort of advantage. They've accrued a 5,000 gold lead in the meantime. I mean, a little bit of fury, some of those towers getting knocked down.
Yep.
Starts to stack up. But at this point in the game, I mean, you're so close to it. Finally, one more ring for Paul. Recognizes he has an extra finger that he can slot them onto. His damage, I think, is going to be solid. It's just, again, getting it to the targets that matter most. We saw how much Variety cared about what was being thrown at him. And so Paul's going to be looking for it. A great ult from Soul, as we saw from the Bolts, what was that, Friday?
Yep.
Can change quite literally everything in the middle of a fight.
Normally, yeah, but that's with a much more pen-centric build. That's
True.
with Magus and Typhon's Fang and Percent Pen. You don't have any of that in the build for Paul. He had 0 penetration up until he finished his Demonic Grip. Now maybe he will threaten Variety, but Variety certainly doesn't look threatened to me. Great River's Rebuke, though. Netroid's got nowhere to go, but not a lot of follow-up quite yet. Benji finally gonna blink in as Captain Twig has spread the chains onto Scary and Aurora, but of course no pull. They will use their Purification Beads as Twig in trouble. Assassinate coming in from Scary D. The heals are good enough. Yes, they are. Captain Twig somehow survives, and Scary's dive does not work this time around. And the Camelot Kings have a moment to take a breather, use their sustain, and then head in towards the Phoenix.
I mean, that has been the key kill. Every single time Twig has died, Scary has been able to get back there. Whether it cost him his life or not, he was able to at least get rid of the jungler on the other side. Now the Kings, with 5 strong, all of a sudden it becomes a much different equation for the Titans, having to figure out how to get through. And they're zoning so well. I mean, Variety just had all of them behind the Phoenix.
And not a care in the world. My man's is chilling back there. Set up a tent behind the Phoenix because that's where he can live for the time being. Mid tier 2 has fallen, middle Phoenix basically already a foregone conclusion. Just a few more autos from Netroid will seal the deal there. And now all that remains as a defensive structure on the map for the Tartarus Titans is a weakened right Phoenix. Now in the good news department, of which there is little, no waves coming for the Camelot King, so it will be harder to end without them.
Better news, 3 seconds for Scary D, Ankh is available. You can take this fight.
Gonna need it because Benji's already in. He's gonna have to use it right away, but Genetics in the front line taking nothing from the ultimates from Cyclone Spin and Paul. River's Rebuke comes back up, and again, the backline's trapped and no threat whatsoever, but Scary has rejoined the fray. Captain Twig not nearly as low this time around, but Scary still meets the same fate either way. 14 on the board now for the Camelot Kings, and in fact, that was Tings getting his 6th of those 14. Blink in from Variety, pick up, push, see you later, Aurora. Great play from Variety once again. The unstoppable man mountain up in the front line here for the Tartarus Titans, but Twig bit off a little bit more than he could chew. I don't think it's gonna matter. Titan down below 10% HP, and that'll do it. The Camelot Kings take game 1 up against the Tartarus Titans.
I mean, that one shakes out. It's very even for a lot of it. There's invades coming out from the Kings. They control that part of the map somehow, but they lose all the neutral objectives. It's that Fire Giant steal that stops the Titans from really pushing forward at any point. And then it all falls apart for the Titans just because they weren't able to do anything. The damage just didn't exist enough to stop down Variety, and just kept running at them.
Yeah, some say Variety is still running at them to this very day. Scary story, I know, but it might end up being true. We'll see if the Tartarus Titans are able to lock them down in game 2. We'll be right back after a quick break.
Baby, I just want to tell you that no, yeah. All of my friends say, girl, you better take care, 'cause that man is trouble, you best beware. And though deep down I know I might be headed for teardrops, now that you got me started, I just can't stop. No, no. 'Cause I love you, baby. I can't let you go, baby. I gotta tell you that I've been looking for love so true. When I was down and out, along came you. Though you might be a liar and a cheat too, I just can't quit you now 'cause I love you. Yes, I do. Can't let you go, baby. I can't let you go, baby. 'Cause I love you, I love you, I love you. No, no, no. city of mine. How I love the city of mine. It never gets me down, city of mine. How I love the city of mine. It never gets me down, yeah.
I was born in the city, I was raised on its edges. My pop work is life when it's complex. I found love in its center. If I could live here forever, think it'd be for the better. I love the weather, even though it's fog 24/7. I love the people, this is city I met all my best friends in.
Hello and welcome back to the SMITE Pro League powered by Alienware. And guys, keep in mind that these giveaways are still happening for Alienware. You want to make sure that you get as involved as possible, and all you need to do is head on over to the SMITE Pro Twitter or use !giveaway in chat for an entry link. However, this is open only to those residents in US and Canada. So if you are in either of those territories, make sure that you hop in on this giveaway. 5 25-inch gaming monitors. These are 240 hertz, absolute cream of the crop that you could imagine for this Alienware gear. And it's the same ones that the pros use. So if you want to play like a pro, or at least try to make yourself feel like one, you can go ahead and enter that giveaway for your better interest. But getting back to things, Mifflin, we just saw Game 1 conclusion did favor the Camelot Kings, like we talked about with the compositions, but more importantly, that looked like a very convincing win for the Kings.
It did. There were a couple of stumbles, though, Taco. Maybe a little bit of Gold Fury steals, Fire Giant steals as well, switching it up back and forth. But how often are you going to be able to rely on 32 actual damage from a Loki to steal Gold Fury? Probably not too consistently. My only concern was going into that one was the lack of frontline from the Tartarus Titans draft, but for the most part of that game, it didn't really show up. It didn't really rear its head until we started to see those Phoenix defenses, man. And then who's stepping up to keep them outside of the Phoenix range? Nobody wanted to have that role because no one was capable of taking up the full brunt of this Camelot Kings team. And due in large part to this guy on the screen right now, that damage output from this Raijin, kind of dumb.
Aurora and Benji just sort of had their hands full trying to deal with Variety and all of that Hercules presence. They didn't even really see too much out of Genetics, but he was kind of just playing asset to the front line there for Variety. It seemed as though he's creating so much space for Big Man Tinks to find a lot of success with this Raijin pick. And Mifflin, gotta ask, for Game 2, do you expect to see Tinks still able to rock the Raijin?
It might get banned out. We might see Paul try and take it for themselves, but look, Raijin shouldn't almost ever be allowed in Big Man Tinks' hands. He is so consistent on this pick, finds first blood for his team, and from there, continually finds that aggression. It's just such a consistent pick as well. The early game aggression, as well as his smooth transition to the late game. Raijin's a mainstay here in Season 8.
So I know you mentioned that the lack of front line definitely seemed a bit of a problem there for the Tartarus Titans, but what are some gods that you would potentially like to see coming out in game number 2 to try and alleviate some of that front line disparity?
Well, normally when you have a god like Yamoja on your team inside that support role, it means that you are sacrificing a little bit of that frontline presence from your support, so generally it's going to be up to your jungler to make up that difference. And Scary D is a player that really likes playing frontline jungles. He's got Osiris in the backpack. He can go towards things like the Raven as well. If Gilgamesh somehow miraculously works his way through bans, that would also act to kind of shore up that frontline a little bit as well. So if it is going to be another Yamoja composition, I want to see Scary D on something that can take some stuff up.
Fairly impressive, though. Benji was able to deal nearly 36,000 damage throughout the duration of Game 1, and yet it seems as though it was never really translating into relevant damage for those team fights. So if he's able to distribute that much, Mifflin, and the Kings are still able to hold their own, you have to wonder where that damage is actually being focused towards, and I think that might come back into the whole discussion of, just not having as consistent of a front line as they would have liked. We did see a little bit more of an aggressive build there from Benji as well. Do you think that had any sort of impact?
It's hard to say, right? When you're the sole frontliner on your team, essentially, you kind of want to at least be able to blow up the opposition. If your whole strategy is, all right, well, I can't tank up 5 enemy gods. I can't do it all on my own. Instead, try and match fire with fire. Bring that aggression, and that's exactly what Benji does. But you said you don't know where that damage comes from Benji. You got to remind you, Taco, Dude's a soul laner, all right? He's got a guy to hit for the entirety of the match.
But even Variety wasn't. He was like half the damage there, so you have to wonder. Like, Benji's clearly making an impact. It's just not happening at the moments that the Titans need it to. So, entering picks and bans for game number 2, Titans, they're going to stay true to that Amir ban outright. Have to imagine for the Kings, since they won game 1, can't picture that their bans would stray too far from that original of the Gilgamesh, Tiamat, and Hell.
No, but instead, though, they do actually make an adaptation. Yamoja immediately removed from the table. They said, look, that healing was annoying to deal with. That ultimate, still incredibly strong as well, able to reposition your team. I'd prefer if you guys don't do it on the side of the Titans, and they won't be able to now. But I want to see the adaptations continue to ring through. The Camelot Kings, as far as I'm concerned, go ahead and run the exact same draft if you're able to. But the Tartarus Titans, I want to see some shift-ups.
There's a chance that Gilgamesh could potentially find his way into the hands of the Tartarus Titans. No, cancel that. They're going to go ahead and ban Gilgamesh despite having first pick option, so seems as though their eyes are set elsewhere. And last game, Mifflin, since they did prioritize the Emoja, do you expect the Tartarus Titans to again look to lock in their support pick early on?
There's not too many supports that I'd want them to go for here. They could look towards the Raijin if they're trying to limit Big Man Tings. King Arthur's still available as well. Even Chiron out there, and it is going to be the Raijin lock-in. And this is a great adaptation immediately from the Tartarus Titans. A lot of the aggression in the early game from the Kings was rooted around their mid 3v3. That Thunderclap in was so hard to deal with, so the Tartarus Titans, go ahead and strip it away.
Paul wants his opportunity to try and play aggressive from the get-go, and Raijin's certainly a guy that he can accomplish that with, but where would you like to see the response to come from the Kings? Because they know that there's going to be that big centerpiece of damage here for the Titans. Do you think that it forces them to try and take their mid pick in those top 3 now?
It doesn't necessarily force them. Big Man Ting's no stranger to going a little bit deeper into the tier list for his mid picks. Could see him go towards something like a Ra. We know he likes the Agni as well, and it's pretty unlikely that the Tartarus Titans are going to look to ban those out. So instead, I think the Kings are right to do exactly what they're doing. Get that front line exactly what you want. Yet again, Hercules and Terra, tons of sustain, tons of tanky front line, great dive material as well. Counter engage already shored up by this Terra pick. I like it.
Very much if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. Tartarus Titans, on the other hand, could definitely see them wanting to prioritize that Chiron, take that pick away from Netroid, give Cyclone something that he might have a little bit better survivability on, and that Cleanse, more importantly, is what I'm mostly keeping in mind here, because Terra Roots did seem to be a bit problematic for Cyclone on that Dense Brew in game number 1, not to mention that the Hercules just had an extremely easy time pretty much walking at him for the duration of that game. So it would be important, I feel like, for the Titans to take a pick that Cyclone actually gets to experience the game with.
Yeah, I hadn't even considered on that original desk how bad a matchup it is for Danzaburou into the Terra. I mean, what's your best escape if your ultimate's down? Turn into a leaf? Well, Terra kind of locks down an entire lane. You're not going to be able to trick her. She'll hit all the leaves at the same time. So instead now, the Tartarus Titans are going to shift up their picks here. Chiron locked in, and that death immunity inside of the Centaurus ultimate is going to be pretty helpful up against what the Kings have already. If the strategy is to dive the Tartarus Titans backline, well, you have to work pretty hard to finish off your kills.
Certainly a lot of burst damage coming through, though, for the Tartarus Titans on this top 3. But Mifflin, with all this damage having been revealed, where do you think the Titans need to go next to round off this composition?
Well, we got to find that front line, right? We got to get that support and that soul lane to come through. Loki does have slight flex potential, could potentially be their soul laner, but very likely going to be Scary D again on this god. So you still have things like the Kepri, if you so choose. If you want to take one from Rapper's book, Geb's out there as well. King Arthur is still available to both teams here. I think that the Tartarus Titans have already drafted themselves in a really good backline. It's now to think about who's tanking up these objectives, who's going to be the first one in and the last one out.
One thing I did notice, though, from game 1, Scary D with that Loki was really like harboring down onto Captain Twig, Daji pick. We actually didn't see as much from the Daji because of the fact that Scary was just focusing him so heavily. Do you think that his intentions with this Loki are again to try and isolate Twig and just keep him away from the fights?
I think his intentions with the Loki are isolate whoever I'm capable of isolating, right? Unfortunately for Twig, it was him that time around, but if we see Medusa out of position, I'm very certain that Scary D is going to be able to exploit that pretty easily, especially considering Medusa's escape against Loki. Not so good. Lacerate, great dash, great engage tool, maybe not so good for escaping the Assassinate ultimate from this Loki pick. Well, I'm concerned right now for the Tartarus Titans because if history's any indicator, they might just pick another assassin for their solo lane. They might just go for a all-in dive composition with the Camelots out of solo. I want to see some tanks.
You'd like to see some tanks, but Tartarus Titans, they don't want to see any sort of sustain. Big Man Tings will lose that signature raw pick of his in the next picks and bans phase, but 5th ban still open here. Could be another look towards Tings on that mid lane position, and we haven't seen him play Kukulkan in quite some time, but Soul's still up for grabs, although not sure how impactful a Soul pick would really be here for Tanks, given that she is a little bit more auto attack dependent, playing around her abilities. That could be some issues because of his ping issues.
No, I really like this ban from the Tartarus Titans. Tings have been very consistent in the past on that Merlin pick. Would have really made it easier for him to go to these neutral objectives in the early game, but instead, somehow, some way, how did we forget about it, Taco? Yanis getting through 10 bans here. This was the premier god at the beginning of Season 8 and towards the tail end of Season 7, and seems like a lot of these mid laners have forgotten about him.
I think it says a lot, though, when a team feels as though it's a bigger priority to ban a Raw and Merlin as opposed to Giannis, despite all of the success that we've seen this god have throughout the duration of Season 8. But that Ares lock-in, a very strong response here from the Tartarus Titans. If Aurora is able to stay on point and execute with those chains, you only need to hit the 1 for the cripple to have its impact.
Man, and that front line is exactly what I wanted to see. Sun Wukong on his own might not be enough, but Sun Wukong and Ares together with that bolstered defense, yeah, that's going to be pretty good. Once you max out that second ability on Ares, that is 50 universal defense for everyone inside your aura's range. And that cripple, it's not just good against Yanis with those portals, but it's phenomenal into Hercules. If he pulls someone in, well, you can stop the driving strike from coming through. If Terra sets up her third or second ability trying to dash through, incredibly telegraphed use of the mobility, go ahead and chain that one out, make sure they aren't able to get the full value from their kit. I like this Ares pick a lot, but it is a double-edged sword. If he falls behind in the early, kind of has that Ymir syndrome in that you're a largely immobile Guardian. You don't deal nearly as much damage as some of the opposition on the other side. You kind of need to find that early game footing if you want to succeed on Ares.
Well, you're mentioning Ares being a little bit immobile here, Mifflin, but I can't help but notice that those Raijin, Chiron, their ultimates are relatively stationary too, and as far as their mobility is concerned, it can be decent, but not exactly the greatest. And when you're dealing with the likes of that through space and time, the Mystic Rush, even the mobility out of the Hercules and Terra, do you expect that there could be some issues for the damage dealers out of the Tartarus Titans, given that they're kind of stuck in one spot when they're trying to dish out their damage?
Not overly concerned about it. Sure, once you go into the Taiko drums, you are a great target for, as you already highlighted, the Yanis and the Raven ultimate, but it's all about picking your spots. And not only is Raijin good at dealing damage in the Taiko drum, but he can use that ultimate for CC, fear off your opposition, use the Thunderclap to escape. They've got great repositioning tools, and Centaurus does make you death immune, so maybe you are diving onto him, but you better believe if you fall low, he's going to come back and send you to the grayscale. And
as far as the Raven-Loki matchup is concerned in the jungle, who would you expect to get the better end of things throughout the laning phase period?
Man, that's such an interesting question, because had this been even just a little bit earlier on, we'd say Loki needs a little bit more items to get involved, but recently we've seen him really flourish in that early game. It's not so much about God matchup on who's going to succeed more, because Raven and Loki both have the tools to really get involved around level 2, level 3. It's about who finds their kill first, who gets their footing, who sets the pace, and then is able to maintain it. If I had to give a slight edge insofar as compositions, I think it's going to be easier for Raven to get involved. Yanis is just so much more slippery than Raijin.
Yeah, that through space and time could definitely pose some issues here for the Tartarus Titans, because they have all this damage to dish out, but if they're not able to completely halt that through space and time in tracks, or even just a single Giannis portal, that could be the entirety of their initiation, just kind of slipping through the cracks here. However, have to point out, Sun Wukong does have some decent chase down potential, and with the way that we saw Scary D piling that Loki in Game 1, have to imagine that he's going to just be looking for those heavy flanks throughout team fights.
Yeah, just such great chase. I mean, get through a wall, assassinate to chase you down. If you're trying to peel off a Sun Wukong, Somersault Cloud is an advancing tool, CC immunity while you're channeling it, and you could just keep running down your opposition. The dive potential from both teams, incredibly strong here. But if I had to favor just one, I think I like this Tartarus Titans draft a bit more.
You think we see a game 3 here then, Mifflin?
I'm not much of a betting man. Well, yeah, I am. Yeah, all right. Everyone in chat, match me right here. $5. I got it on the Tartarus Titans. I'm not allowed to say that, I'm pretty sure. I might get in trouble.
Are you paying everybody?
Yeah. How many people are in the chat right now? I'll pay every single one of you $5 if the Titans lose.
We're not going to hold him to it because that seems a little bit ludicrous.
Please, Paul.
I don't know if Mifflin's really putting too much into this Tartarus Titan squad or not, but whether or not we get a game 3, we've got Agar and Gore to help us figure it out.
We're going to the moon, chat. We're all taking Mifflin's money tonight. Oh, baby. Tartarus Titans up against the Camelot Kings, and all of a sudden, Gore, this match just got a whole lot more interesting.
I don't think Mifflin has the money for that.
He doesn't. I know he doesn't.
I'm pretty sure I've seen his bank account. I don't know.
Why have you seen his bank
He's
account?
making faces at me now. I've said, look, I know what you're talking about when you're ordering food. I know where your problems have been.
Yeah, he's done enough Uber Eats and DoorDash to not be able to pay that.
Man, he got some
for
really good lunch yesterday, though.
Oh, he did. That lunch was really good. I definitely stole a little bit. That's the way it goes around here, though. You know, you walk into a desk segment, lose a little bit of lunch.
How did he follow through with it? I'm sorry, I've lost now. Mifflin...
The old Mifflin double down is.
I will give everyone money. No, don't do that.
Yeah, that's not going to happen, chat. I'm going to tell you that right now. But he can dream.
Even at a baseline.
Yeah, it's not going to work. Just like Genetics,
it's too much money.
Trying to do this purple buff alone will not work. Aurora is here in order to throw a wrench in his plan. Genetics, no hand of the gods, and it does get confirmed. And now Aurora is in some trouble, but Genetics decides not to stun him, instead to use his auto attacks to continue to slow that Terra passive, being a little bit more valuable in Genetics' mind than the stun coming through and the damage. I don't know. I mean, I trust Genetics' judgment. He's the Terra master, certainly not me, but Aurora walks out still quite low at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's not going to be able to have the same pressure an Ares would have this early on, huh? Like, I mean, you're half health, you're going to be able to heal up, but it's going to take a little bit longer for the Titans to start pushing forward. I say that, and of course, immediately I look at the mini-map, and they're right at the tower line of the King, so they are not waiting at all.
Yeah.
They do not care about Aurora's health bar. He knows he'll get there eventually. And that's something that I think is going to be really key and crucial to this. How often this Ares is walking out.
Oh my goodness, where did Captain Twig just go? Just a slow from Paul onto a slow from Scary D into a first blood for the Tartarus Titans. All of a sudden, Mifflin's starting to sweat. It's an early first blood here for the Titans.
I'm living in that moment now. I don't know where that went. Loki, I mean, Mifflin had even called it. He said Loki has been getting more involved in these early game fights. That's about as early game as you can get for it. Scary D showcasing a lot more that he can get for some. Well, I mean, I guess it is still a kill on the Twig at the end of the day. Exactly what he was doing last game. Just a completely different style of kill here. A good start for him, and something that we didn't get to see too often. He had a really good, I mean, he had a good late game. He had a good early game and a good mid game, but it was those last couple of Phoenixes where he just wasn't impactful at all. So I think Scary looking to try and find himself in nothing like that position now. Try to get a good lead, especially against Robin, who you know early on is going to be able to kind of take these fights a little more consistently and really be a driving force for the Kings. I think trying to shut down Twig here is going to be a big play.
Paul getting his 2-1 through the first 2 levels doesn't level the jump. I mean, Giannis not exactly the most threatening god in the mid 2v2, and maybe that's what allows that first blood to happen. The big damage coming from the Raijin, of course, matters quite a bit as Variety wins the Scorpion battle on this right-hand side. That's the peak of excitement in solo lane, is winning those little trades over Ku and over the Scorpion. The Scary D has arrived in order to put some damage onto Variety, and by some, I mean a lot of damage. But here comes Twig, blink in, Root gets the beads from Scary, slow from Prana Onslaught's good, but Twig is now left completely alone. Overhead kick is there, and that is enough to disengage the fight, and Variety has picked up a teleport, so he is back and ready to defend his blue buff from invading.
A little more gold in a Jotun's Wrath or something similar, and so all of a sudden Scary D is able to find that kill. That one was purely cooldowns oriented. He had them up, gets a lot of damage, they go down. Still surprisingly a lot of damage on Twig, but not enough to find the kill there. I admire where the Titans, I mean, it's the same kind of style that they were trying to play last game, but they're actually matching up to it more this time around. And with Paul on a Raijin as opposed to the Soul, and specifically going more of a traditional build on this Raijin, you can expect a lot of damage from him as the game continues, so that's going to let Scary D run rampant early on. Same thing for Cyclone Spin. He's going to be on something not only safer, but I think going to be able to get a lot more consistent damage. The backliners here for the Titans, are looking like they're going to just feel better.
Druids use the ultimate aggressively to clear the way, but Cyclone, hey, not like this, buddy. Scary D jumps in just to try and stun out Netroid to maybe let the res come through, but that doesn't work, just like that root does not work for Captain Twig. That would have spelled the end for Scary D had that root connected, but Mystic Rush a little bit off the mark, as is the root after the fact. So 1 for nothing on this left-hand side. It's Cyclone Spin trying to set up for a gank and getting a little bit too excited.
And kind of nothing short of a solo kill, admittedly. Like
Yep.
Netroid did the whole
him.
work on his job, or on his own, and was able to find the follow-up and not have to pay for it. Only uses his ult, still maintains the beads. Granted, both hunters do, so that's going to be helpful, especially because we're hitting that level 5 mark, and I look at none other than Aurora at this point because he's going to be maybe the best level 5 just in terms of what that ult can do. Early on, though, I mean, what, there's 2, 3 people maybe at a time that you're going to be able to grab. That mid 3v3 gets a lot more interesting, but you're not necessarily as stressed about it if you're, Netroid, maybe in Variety here, and to the point where Variety doesn't even need to worry about beads until maybe his second slot. And even then, it's a maybe. He might actually want to get pulled in to get close to the backline.
Maybe that's the play for him, but we'll see if that's the direction that Variety wants to go. That blink was pretty key for him in game 1. As Twig shows up on this right-hand side, but Benji still on Sun Wukong, still pretty much unkillable. Won't be locked down quite yet. Variety back on this pick, but as you mentioned, I think that the difference in Mage is going to be the difference maker here for the Tartarus Titans and locking him down a little bit better. Nice blink coming from Captain Twig, and Scary's got beads, not blink, so he can't catch up. Assassinate is up and available now, as is his Purification beads. Variety splits the uprights with a driving strike, does not find a home, and in comes Twig through space and time as well, but the Unstable Vortex misses Benji and Scary, both alive, as Benji now going to find his angle back in with the Somersault Cloud. Tings has already taken a portal. Tycho drums from Paul, accurate enough. Not perfect on him, but good enough as Benji smacks him down with the cudgel, and Tartarus Titans knock down the Giannis.
I mean, that is such a big fight from both sides having it happen the way, but luckily getting the kill if you're the Titans is going to be able to make things, even in terms of experience, pretty much flat on the board. All of that really kind of existing right now. Hunters, a little lead for Netroid after that solo kill, and then a small lead for Benji, kind of balancing out as the pillars of the map on the two sides. But other than that, everything is low and close. And that's how they kept it for, what, 25 minutes in game number 1? I mean, it did not necessarily matter how well you farmed if you were the Kings, how many neutral objectives you got if you were the Titans, but I just don't feel like this game's going to follow that same path. I think the Titans, again, maybe not the best quote-unquote secure in the world to be able to make sure that, the Furies, the Pyromancers of the world go their way, but a lot of team fight around them that I think is going to give a lot more pressure to them than the Kings were really having to deal with last game.
I mean, this time around, the Titans have Aurora on probably his signature god in this Ares. If you've been a longtime SPL fan, you've seen Aurora make insane plays on this god, win games by himself. Of course, you think of Hercules for Aurora for largely the same reason, doing a lot of the exact same things. Now he's doing it on the Old Faithful in the Ares, and he's got a pretty good composition to do it into, I think, Thor, because a lot of mobility on the other side, a lot of gods who don't want to have to use beads in order to get away, or an ultimate like Giannis. This Terra is going to have some trouble. Genetics immediately has to go beads instead of something like the Blink in that first slot. I like the Ares pick quite a bit here for Aurora.
And it's been one of those things, I've been giving a lot of credit to Jake and the Bolts because they've been playing it a lot, but whenever there's Ianna's on the other side, that's how they were dealing with it most of the time, was like, okay, cool, throw up your portals, do whatever you want. We're just going to cripple everybody and burn them down with % damage, by the way. Like, I'm going to have fun playing Ares, but also I'm going to make it so much easier for my teammates to follow up. Like Scary D, Paul, Cyclone, those targets are essentially sitting still. They might be walking, but it's going to be very easy to follow up on anything that Aurora sets up. And that's not even factoring in the ult, like you had mentioned. The beads, having to either use your beads or your ult, it makes it so much easier for someone like Loki to get into the back line and cause a lot of trouble, but same thing for maybe Sun Wukong.
Nice steal on the blue from Benji, but now body blocked in, being slowed by these auto attacks from Genetics, and he will have to expend the Somersault Cloud. Still stealing away the enemy blue buff, especially from a mana-hungry character like Hercules. Feels good enough to trade ultimates in that moment, but a nice stun. Twig has Blink, and there comes the Terra ultimate as well. Here it is. It's a Blink Mystic Rush, big commit, but they get him. Benji ends up falling, but now Twig in trouble. Chained after the assassinating Aurora is going to put himself on the board, but Variety has been given the expressway straight on top of Scary D, and he picks him up and puts him down. That's 2 for 1 in favor of the Kings.
It's a good chase coming down from the Kings, being able to find Benji. I honestly thought maybe a little bit of overcommittal to it, and, well, ultimately Twig does pay for it with his life, but at the end of the day, 2 for 1, jungle for jungle plus solo is going to be beneficial. And it might be more than 2 for 1 here.
Oh, Cyclone Spin just got eviscerated. Netrioid absolutely decimates him in the 1v1. Dashes forward, and Cyclone doesn't use an ultimate, doesn't use a relic. He accepts his fate between Tier 1 and Tier 2 tower. I don't know what they put in Netrioid's Wheaties this morning, but man, is he playing well, bro. Steals away the Fire Giant in Game 1, and that's 2, count them, 2 solo kills on Cyclone Spin less than 10 minutes in.
I mean, this was something we've talked to the Kings about it specifically, and like you talk about it behind the scenes. It was like the big question marks, like, man, Netrioid had a good year last year. Why is he not on the Leviathans anymore? And it was just personality differences, right? I think is the polite way to describe it, of them just ultimately not getting along as well as they would like and making that choice. But we talked to the Kings about it, and they're like, yeah, we were kind of surprised that Netrioid genetics got along so well. Like, they just fit together incredibly well from the get-go, and that kicked this duo lane off to a much higher extent. And Netrioid showcasing that it doesn't necessarily matter who's beside him, he's still going to be able to find it. He has a 2-level lead over Cyclone right now, and somebody that I think has been able to showcase exactly why he is so threatening as a Hunter player.
That feels so bad for Variety. Expends the ultimate, trying to secure the blue, double taps it, leaves it at 9 HP, where Benji gladly takes it away from him. So back-to-back blues go blue for the Tartarus Titans on the order side, but Variety still not hurting too badly. 1-0-1, he's up about half a level right now over Benji.
I mean, it feels, like you said, a little bit better overall. Level 12, so he's going to be able to back and get that second relic. We'll find out what he ultimately wants, and admittedly, Blink feels kind of like the Variety style.
Well, he was 12 when he TP'd in. He just decided not to get a relic. Maybe he didn't realize that he was 12 when he backed.
Maybe he's waiting specifically to see, like, because Roar hasn't been loud. Like, I mean, we were talking a lot about this Ares, but I haven't seen a lot of him so far. Like, every now and then he shows up in somebody else's screen, somebody else is doing something. He's been there for the aggression, but hasn't necessarily been able to find a lot. The Blink ult combo, the kind of patented combo for Ares, hasn't necessarily been showing up, and fits the pace of game number 1 and here in game 2 very well. But maybe Variety's trying to figure out if he actually needs to be maybe more defensive, or if he can warrant going more aggressive with that Blink.
He does.
Yeah, he's going to be able to. I mean, at this point, I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't. Last time, it was almost beneficial for you to be in their face, and Ares is just going to give you the one-stop shop into the backline.
That being said, the difference between the Raijin with the full pen build and the Soul with the auto attack build is pretty stark.
Pretty massive.
Yeah, pretty stark, I would say, on the damage that he's going to end up eating. We'll see if Paul can get the job done, as he's already finished off his Divine Ruin. Aurora in someone's jungle, that's where he is, in the enemy red buff pit. They're going to successfully steal this away. Benji is here as well, and that numbers advantage is enough to guarantee a red buff invade, but the Tartarus Titans don't seem to want a whole lot more on the back end. Netrioid, Genetics, and Twig going to push forward and maybe go for this Gold Fury. Netrioid is massive in comparison to Cyclone Spin. A Balance Blade just over top of him outright, plus 2 levels, and his completed Transcendence. So you're looking to fight around Netrioid at any given point, at least at this point in the game.
Yeah, I mean, this is like Medusa's best part of the game as well, right? Like, I mean, you're hitting the mid game, you've got a nice 2-level lead. Like, you want Netrioid to be a part of anything and everything that you can cook up from this moment forward. And they've been able to slowly accrue 1,500-ish gold, not even, about 1,400, as they bounce back and forth. And so Gold Fury right now for the Kings would be able to really cement themselves a lead. Of course, if it goes to the Titans, it brings us right back to even, maybe even slightly in their favor. And that's something that could be big for them. I mean, Aurora just a little bit behind the Terra, not enough that I think it's necessarily going to matter. Again, that level 12 tick is the most important part for supports until 17. So that's going to matter in terms of relic choice. But other than that, you're just looking at that level deficit in the Hunters and the impact that these mid laners are going to have. Big Man Tings during one of the last engagements didn't really find the unstable vortex you would like to see from a Yanis, but through space and time, despite the nerfs, despite some of the nerfs to his build, still a pretty good ult to have in a team fight.
Yeah.
So I think that this is going to come down to a lot of these backliners and impact. And so far, it's been all Netroid all day. Just put him on a pedestal.
Level 15, highest in the game right now. But I'm a little surprised at the lack of pace by the Kings. The same thing I said in the last game. I mean, anytime you've got a Terra on your team, you're down to take it to the team fighting phase because that's where she really is at her best. But when you've got a lead like Netroid has, when he's earned this type of advantage, I feel like you got to alter the game plan a little bit. You got to play around it. And the Kings seem still willing. I mean, look, he's still going to hit level 20 first. He's still going to hit his power spikes first. But he's up a significant amount of XP at the very least, but at least not an itemization anymore. Cyclone Spin backs, finishes Aussie at the exact same time. There's a pretty big ward difference, at least in inventory. Netroid with a regular and a sentry. And Cyclone had to really break the bank, Mifflin style, in order to grab just the Aussie at all. Oh, trust me, man. I just remembered he got a PS5 last week, bro. No shot. He's able to pay up on his and put his money where his mouth is. So he's really hoping that this one goes his way. Netroid level 16, still looking to play aggressive on a Cyclone Spin, this time with genetics in hand. But I don't know, Gord, do you feel the same way as me, that the Kings are maybe playing a little bit too passively?
Yeah, like it's like the best way, like squandering their lead, where it's like you don't have a lot, and admittedly, in most circumstances, I'm not going to harp on you for being patient with it. I think this is actually a really good style of play for them, a good pace for them, in most circumstances, at least for their play style. But for the lead they have, at least the advantages they have, put some pressure on the Fury, at least force a fight out of it, see what you can do. But I think it's kind of this ever-looming presence of Aurora. It's a little bit threatening. He's only got one aura item online right now, so he's not gotten necessarily like a large power spike from his passive, but it's enough, right? Like all of a sudden you're thinking, well, if we get into a team fight, we start up this Fury, we get a blink, he ults, we all use our beads, what happens after that? That's where things get a lot more frightening. Like, does Variety loop in for the back? Does Genetics maybe deliberately get pulled, make sure his ult can hit as many people as possible? Like, there's so many little details, I think, for the Kings. And maybe they're over-worrying it. Maybe I'm over-worrying it here. Sometimes you just got to go in and say, look, my Medusa's got 2 levels up on you, on anybody on your team, save for Benji. We're just going to fight.
We're just going to fight, and here it is. It's Captain Twig going in. He has used the Sunder that he has picked up. He upgraded a Sunder instead of getting beads at level 12, and it's a poke Sunder in this instance. Finally, the Kings are going to head towards the Gold Fury. Aurora on the way in, but he's kept in combat by Variety. In fact, pushed in, and here comes Cyclone Spin. Not quite enough. The Kings do grab the Fury, but Aurora goes in right after the fact, and he is getting absolutely decimated by the backline of the Kings. Big Man Tinks is the one to claim the kill, but Netroid's in trouble, low and relicless, as Benji is going to be able to get in there and do enough. In fact, it's Paul who gets the finishing blow, but Cyclone brought back in Aegis, a necessity against Variety's damage. But that might just be it. 1 or 2 for 1 with the Kings getting the Gold Fury. Paul still going forward a little bit, but no Taiko drums for him. At the end of the day, the Kings get the objective, but they lose the guy who was the one they were getting the objective for. It's Netroid who falls.
And I'd have to watch that back maybe 3 times to figure it out. Cyclone gets pulled by the Ares ult. His beads either mistimed and were used slightly beforehand and unfortunately weren't working out well for him, or the CC came through and I just missed what locked him down prior that he needed to use the beads for. Either way, that's definitely something that changes the pace of that game for the Titans, or the fight for the Titans. Still not necessarily favorable, but they keep the gold lead more or less where it was. We saw it on the charts. Like, it does take that dip down, but there's such a nice pleasure of killing Netroid that it brings it back a little higher than it was, but I mean, that's maybe 500 gold, maybe not even 300 on that chart. That makes the big difference. So ultimately, the Titans only losing out just a little bit from a Fury that should have meant a lot more for the Kings.
Still, the Kings maintain a slight lead, about 1,600 gold, 18 minutes in. And they're still playing around this Terra primarily, it feels like, waiting for Genetics to continue to get even stronger, put more points into that ultimate. Allow that Earth and Fury to really carry your team fights. He's got a 2-level lead over Aurora right now, but make that 1 level over the enemy support. So certainly in an okay position, and so is Variety. Look at him, willing to take a 2v1. I don't know if he knows it's a 3v1, but really I don't think he cares much, as the Kings end up pulling away a Pyromancer while the rest of the Titans are distracted by the Hercules.
And this is where things get a little more devastating. A lot of these teams, you'll always suffer the same fate. If you're down, 1,500, 1,600, it's not the end of the world. But when you start losing the neutral objective after neutral objective, that's when it starts to really stack up. And there's still a lot of pressure on the Fire Giant at this point in the game. You can get it as the Titans, especially with all the towers still standing for the Kings. That's a lot of gold on the map for you. What is that, 4,500 total that you can get just from the 6 towers? And that's a lot to swing in your favor with the Fire Giant. But you're at a deficit walking to that Fire Giant to begin with, so it becomes a lot more difficult of a fight just to take at the very beginning, let alone trying to fight on an equal footing or from behind.
Aurora again, sundered by Captain Twig, and again, doesn't even lose half of his HP for that sunder. Twig going mostly damage as well, now starting to go into a little bit of defense. Pretty aggressive build to not have Purification beats for. Unstable Vortex doesn't find a home, and red buff won away by the Tartarus Titans, but you're starting to see these XP advantages grow for the Camelot Kings. 2 levels in the jungle for Captain Twig, about a half a level for Tings in mid, half a level to a level for Netrioid in ADC, but that's not such a bad sign for the Tartarus Titans, at least save for the jungle. As watch out, Netrioid in trouble. There's the Petrify, but this time not quite as good. Scary D nearly got him, but he's going to need a little bit of help. No, the dot damage from the stealth will get the job done. Netrioid falls, but Aurora might have been left to the wolves. Speaking of, Cyclone Spin gets eaten alive by Captain Twig on the back end. Blink was all it took for Twig to get that kill, as Aurora's got nowhere to go between a portal, a wall, and the rest of the Camelot Kings. He falls to Captain Twig's damage, and he's not done. Blink forward, gets that Mystic Rush on top of Scary D, and he's revealed because of the Aerondites. Genetics trying to chase him down, and Genetics might just win that trade at this point. Level 15 on the Terra, and he will indeed get that last auto, smacks him down with the big uppercut, and Genetics finds his second kill of the contest. 3 for 1. Again, Netrioid falls, but this time it costs the Titans even more.
Yeah, big swing for the Kings, though. Now they have a lot of pressure to put onto these mid-tier 1, at least, maybe the mid-tier 2. Netroid's still waiting to respawn, so that one might have to take a little while before anybody gets in on it. But it gives them a nice little swinging path. Oni Fury's about to come up, more than likely the safest place to go, as opposed to something like a Fire Giant. But they pretty much have the world to work with as they've been knocking down these towers. That mid-tier 1, maybe one of the most important when it comes to the amount of pressure you can start exerting around the map and in the jungle specifically. So I'm looking towards, well, man, that red buff, admittedly, the timer's a little long on it, but could become the king. Same thing for purple over there. Hasn't necessarily been kind of back and forth, I guess is the best way to describe it, for Cyclone Spin and Netroid, but they can really start to pilot where they want this game to go. They get to dictate the pace. Yet still the Titans right now are in a better position to start up the Fury if they want it.
They're the ones with the map pressure, and it seems like they're the ones
collapse,
with the ward as well. Everyone from the King started to walk over. Tings is backing, as is Twig. So you got 2 members in base, though one of them has an ultimate that takes them there. So I don't think they're too concerned if they need the damage from Tings to fight. Variety is the focus, and you wouldn't tell it by his health bar. He is chilling. Double stun off that assassinate from Scary D. Still Variety unstoppable, and here comes the Taiko drums, and you bet that's not going to take this man down. Unkillable on the Hercules. Tings not quite as lucky, though, as he uses both relics to try to get away from Benji and Scary D. He will take a portal, and that will eject him from the fight, but the Titans are the ones with all the momentum. Now it's Netrioid pulled in and nowhere to go. No escape is aptly named for the support for the Tartarus Titans, and they're going to grab Netrioid one more time. Benji, the lone man, still brawling for the Titans as the rest of the squad is headed back towards the Oni Fury.
I remember a time when Netroid was 2-0, and
Yes.
he had a 2-level lead. And things were looking great for the duo lane for the Kings. Granted, it's not necessarily looking worse for them now.
I don't know.
They don't have a lot going for them, at least on that side of the map. Now, Fire Giant look, I mean, you can fight this if you're the Kings, but Netroid's not going to get it no matter what happens here.
Fire Giant pulled, and Twig's got a great angle. Blink and Sunder up and available. He'll toss Sunder Paul's way, and that'll respond with the Aegis. Beads also used by the Ryder. No ultimate for him either, but Twig is the one in trouble.
Ooh.
Paul just got flattened by big man Tings, and now he's going to fire off the through space in time. Just misses onto Scary D, but he's got Unstable Vortex to cover that one. Double kill for the mid laner for the Camelot Kings, and he's going to put out some good damage onto Aurora as well. Variety, what do you know, has found another pull. Blink forward from Genetics. No escape that way, but Variety pushes Aurora and Cyclone through the exit. Tings being chased down by Benji, and he'll get flattened by that Somersault Cloud.
but Variety's done enough. He takes down Cyclone Spin on the back end. An absolute brawl around the Fire Giant, and it's 3 for 2 in favor of the Kings with their ADC coming back from the grave, and they've got 2 tanks and a Medusa. That means that Fire Giant is under threat, but Benji knows it and is still local.
Yeah, hanging around. Had to use that Somersault Cloud, though. So he's not going to have the same dive potential, and ultimately they drop it. We can see that. I think Benji recognizes that as well, not seeing the Fire Giant go for any attacks. I mean, you would have lost it. Twig wouldn't have had it. Tings definitely wouldn't have had it. Admittedly, I think Netroid is maybe the most important person to get it on. Then I'd follow up the front lines with the way they've been playing.
Yeah.
I want Variety and Genetics to have whatever help they can get because they are creating way more room than I think anybody else. But the Kings are playing this very well. They're good at dissecting the Titans' draft and specifically their lineup, getting to the back line, putting pressure on the Paul, forcing Scary and Cyclone into these awkward decisions as to where do you want to fight. And it's making things just ultimately more difficult. That last fight around the Fury was just clean for the Titans, but they don't want to let them have that too often. Because at this point, they still have a distinct, well, not even the map advantage anymore. 2 tier 1s taken down on both sides. This Fire Giant's going to be the big decision maker because, I mean, 25 minutes in, 3,000 gold, it's enough, but it's not really as big of a lead as it really should feel like.
Oni Fury's up, and that is valuable at this point in the game. Can put some map pressure on the side lanes, potentially open up a Fire Giant, and the Titans get the Oracle Vision, but they won't pull the objective. I know Hindu Man's usually the one who makes the wrestling references, but he's busy with England, of course, trying to take it home. So I guess I've got to fill in that gap. I'm getting real Degeneration X vibes from the front line right now of the Camelot Kings. Variety and Genetics both undying, and they both just seem unstoppable in this front line. No response quite yet from the Titans for that front line. We'll see if they can remedy that. As the Kings, knowing that the Titans have knowledge of what's going on this Fury, still going to pull it. Twig doesn't take a whole lot of damage, and Tings' ultimate nearly clipped Paul, but he's able to escape. Scary D ends up getting stunned by Variety and Genetics, and that's going to force his ultimate in order to get away. But that's 2 ultimates down. One of those characters has full CDR, and that's Big Man Tings. He's sitting at 40%, so not too scared in order to fire off that ultimate like he did on that fight.
I mean, they're in a good spot to still fight here, but with Scary D not having the same, let's call it loop around potential, the gank potential that he has.
Still
I'd
there.
expected a lot, but yeah, he's just hanging out on the side, ultimately not able to get into the back line the way he wants to, but this is a good spot for Aurora to get aggressive. But Benji's so low now.
Already up in that Somersault Cloud. Cyclone Spin used his ultimate as well. That's 2 ults down, and Benji goes in, still has the knockup and the Ox for him, so he's out, at least for the time being. But Variety is not going to let this man get away for free. Able to pull him in, misses the push. But Aurora is just moseying in onto the entirety of the enemy team. He's going to find an ultimate, but it doesn't get a whole lot. Twig has used Mystic Rush and is now taking some damage, but so is Aurora. Variety in that back line once again. This time he's been sundered, and he's still standing strong. Great kite work by him, but Big Man Tings is the one in trouble. A sliver of HP, and he hits eject through space and time, gets everyone out the easy way, as they'll all take the portals out, but this is going to be a free Oni Fury now for the Tartarus Titans, though they earned it. A hard-fought team fight where both Paul and Cyclone were able to stay nice and clean. No damage or one of them, all their relics still up, and the Tartarus Titans front line was the one that had to do the majority of the heavy lifting.
And they get it done, right? And I guess that's all you can ask for. The Sunder used by Aurora, but such a low cooldown that you're not going to have to worry about it. Scary, ultimately, yes, Blink is down, has his ult, so he gets 1 for 1 on that. But you get rid of the Aegis on both Tings and Netroid. You make them feel a lot more uncomfortable. The Blinks are down as well. I mean, left side fights for the Kings just have not been looking too great for them lately. Heck, maybe at all, like except for the 1v1s, all of the group ups on the left-hand side have not gone their way. It's more how the Titans can translate this into the Fire Giant fight, this dance, where they can get aggressive. I put a lot of pressure back onto Aurora.
But it's only a matter of time, it feels like, until one of these ultimates from Tings hits home. And as soon as that happens,
that's the game changer.
That changes the game every single time. Check out the starter item upgrade here for Captain Twig. Normally we see Protector.
Oh yeah.
Whenever you see Eye of the Jungle, or excuse me, you see that starter item picked up. But this time it is the Seer of the Jungle. And this lets him get pure ward vision anytime he clears a jungle camp. I actually think it's very strong. Excited to see how it performs here for Twig as Variety gets jumped upon by Paul. He looks really upset about it. Only lost about 20% of his health. Then he'll press 3 and blink in and get both
2 members of the Tartarus Titans, and it's Aurora. The only one brought in is Scary D, did not get pushed in. That Petrify did good work onto Paul, and Genetics is in onto Aurora. The entirety of the Tartarus Titans are grouped up, and Captain Twig did make a pay. Mystic Rush, Piranha Onslaught, see you later, Aurora. But now he's got to back up. Scary D, the one left in the front line, and he gets stunned and toasted by big man Tings. But Cyclone Spin somehow still standing. He goes in after getting resurrected by the ultimate, but Captain Twig puts an end to that nonsense. Another kill for Twig, 4, 3, and 9 for the Camelot Kings jungler. But now he's got to contest with Benji. Blink in into the Tiger Stun. Good damage coming out of the Sun Wukong, but not good enough. Benji is the lone Tartarus Titan around, as Paul, the only other one who's alive, is coming back from base. But that was good work by Benji. Put some good damage numbers on a Twig, forced him back to base. And now with Paul on the way, it's a 3-on-2, but Benji just barely avoids getting rooted, does not get picked up and pushed. And the Camelot Kings have to slow down the pace. They don't look like they're going for Fire Giant quite yet, Gore. Take their time, go Pyro first, and then decide what to do.
Those relics being available specifically for Paul made the biggest difference. Those beads, he'd be dead otherwise. I mean, He is absolutely alive just because he had no pressure in the fight prior. And so that gives him a little bit of wiggle room to work with here. But wiggle room's starting to close very tightly here on the Titans. Like, there's not a lot that they've been doing, again, on Fire Giant side fights that have really been dictating the pace of the game. They end up going in, but they're the ones who use more of their relics here. The ults aren't landing the way I think they want them to. And we're starting to look at specifically what Tings is going to be able to do. Twig has been just immense this game. I mean, 4, 3, and 9, being a part of 13 of 15 kills. He is a driving factor right now. And unfortunately, Scary D, last time on the Dodgy, Scary's back there, 3, 4 times in a row, kills off Twig, and is able to help his team at least keep the fight even. This time, it's just been so difficult. I mean, it's so hard to lock down a Raven as a Loki. He hasn't really had a clear target.
EFG is up, and Genetics is tanking it, but no one's DPSing it, trying to bait in the Tartarus Titans, and Genetics is happy to tank this up for a little bit, especially when standing in that monolith, getting the Lotus Crown protections. But this time he has ended up picking up. No beads for Netrioid for 19. Same cooldown for Paul's beads on the other side. Scary about 20 seconds away from his beads. And Cyclone Spin 38 on the Aegis. That's your relic check coming into this fight. And they're going to need all of them with the way that these fights have been going. A little bit back and forth, I'd say. No clean engagements for either side, really. There's a lot of poke being exchanged, but you wouldn't tell it from the health bars. Again, Genetics doing good work, but how about Benji going in onto Tings? Great damage onto the Giannis. This time pulled back in an early beads from Benji, not trusting that cleanse was coming from Cyclone Spin. Is Paul going to jump in onto Genetics? A lot of things being thrown, but no haymakers have really landed quite yet.
And this is the big problem the Titans have been. I mean, you've got Sun Wukong, you've got Aurora. They're really good at being able to create engagements, right? I mean, Ares is known for starting fights, but the Kings, specifically Variety Genetics, it's their top two, and you can see why. I mean, again, 2-0 and 10, 2-0 and 9 for the two of them. They have been driving game number 1. They've been driving game number 2, and they're really creating the opportunities for their carries.
And it's the animosity pickup for Genetics. So those Terra autos that he's really put on display so far this set will continue to do some work. Benji pushed, but not followed up on quite as well as they would have liked, especially with his beads being on cooldown. That stun just barely missed. Variety finds another push, this one onto Aurora, but again, not a whole lot coming. Benji's poke has been the most valuable so far. That upgraded Bluestone putting in absolute work for him at this point. Those cudgels have really chunked, but this time Variety may have overstepped. Here comes Tycho Drums, but Genetics has found a good Earth and Fury on the back end, but Paul has nowhere to go, just up and over the wall, and the Aegis somehow bought him enough time in order to survive, but Captain Twig will not be quite as lucky. On the backside, Benji ended up falling, and here come the Kings. Through space and time gets fired off, but does not find a home once again. Big man getting cut down by Scary, but then turned to dust by the Petrify. Scary D's dive shut down by Netrioid. And again, it's the same story. 2 for 1, 3 for 2, 4 for 3. No clean team fight wins. This time it's the Kings who come out on top, but only 2 for 1. and not healthy enough to immediately go for the enhanced Fire Giant.
I was going to say, when you have Tings and Netroid both alive with 2 front lines in front of them, like that screams, okay, at least we have the pressure now. Maybe we force another fight out of the Titans, or make them try to go for a risky play.
They aren't even threatening
They just
the Fire
haven't,
Giant.
yeah, they haven't had the health bar. They haven't had the, I think, the survivability afterward to feel confident in it. And unfortunately, it's kind of led this to not even a stalemate. They've just, well, I guess maybe it's a stalemate, but in the wrong way. They're constantly the same amount of gold ahead every segment of the game. This Primal Fury should help a lot, though, in terms of feeling a little more confident in burning down the Fire Giant. They need
but
to
the
get a cleaner
Titans
fight. It's the break that they just can't get away with.
But that's the Titans losing another late game fight, and the Camelot Kings still don't get the Fire Giant off of it. They still haven't gotten a single Fire Giant yet this game. Despite these fights, 4 for 3, 3 for 2, 2 for 1, seemingly always going the Kings' way, 17-10 in the kill department in their favor. But that main objective still elusive. And Tier 2 tower is still up across the board on both sides. So, I mean, we're certainly at the point where you win one team fight, you win the game from here on either side. Whether or not you even need Fire Giant is dependent on how clean that objective really is. But you just feel like the Kings, again, maybe a little bit gun-shy on going for some of these riskier plays. A team that has been willing to do many risky plays throughout the season, maybe trying to play a little bit more conservative this time around as they head into Phase 2.
Well, it's just a little under 7,000 gold in the favor of the Kings, and this is the last week I get to say it. This might be the last game that I get to say it, but this is the time where that gold is maybe going to translate into selling your boots and buying a speed elixir to make sure you can fight around for that power curve. Right now, it's a lot of upgraded relics for the Kings that you just don't have on the Titans, as well as a ton of wards. I mean, everybody's got them. They just dropped a ton on the Kings. 8 in the inventory there of the Titans. Looking for the vision, and they're just poking around at the fights, but one good knock-up, that one from Variety misses. That's all it takes to really start this off.
I think that actually might have been cleansed by Cyclone because it looked good, and that was a great cleanse coming from Cyclone. Blink in from Variety. He whiffs on Scary D, does not find the Driving Strike or the Earthbreaker after the fact, so Scary able to pull a relic from Variety. Some good poke during this engagement, though, coming from Big Man Tings with the small amounts of sustain have come into play here from the Titans. Aurora, of course, that bolster defenses now gives you extra HP 5. That will count for healing up your team. And of course, that Chiron passive, we've seen Cyclone's been put down a lot of training exercises in the back line as Big Man Tings gets blink chained, and all of a sudden, here comes the damage from Cyclone Spin up and over the top. Big Man gets caught sleeping. Both relics still up, but the mid laner is down, and this could be the Titans' opportunity in order to go for the FG. But even with that pick, still 4 members who are awfully healthy on the other side. That being said, Genetics and Variety have used their ultimates, and that's a huge deal. That won't stop them quite yet. Tartarus Titans have pulled the EFG, but it is taking not very much damage. 219 in auto from Cyclone Spin, not really threatening the objective too much, and the Camelot Kings know it. They might be able to just buy enough time for Tings to respawn.
I mean, 30 seconds, it's simultaneously an eternity, and also not that long at all to wait here, and I think they're going to be able to. It's more getting Tings back into the fight. You had mentioned this earlier, though. He just happens to have an ult that will drop him right into the Fire Giant pit if need be.
Yeah.
But finally, the Titans are going to start this up, at least force Variety and Genetics to get aggressive where they don't want to be.
Root and stun on the Scary. He loses about a third. That's going to be all the damage the Kings have for the moment. Now, Tings is spawning right now, and most times this means you have about 8 seconds before you can really come in and affect the fight. Not the case when there's a Giannis on the map. He can affect the fight immediately, and immediately the Tartarus Titans recognize that and start to turn tail. The Camelot Kings now going to throw their hat in the ring, DPSing the FG just a little bit. That chain lands on a Variety, and all of a sudden, they might have the damage, but another good ultimate comes from Genetics. Variety's coming on back, and the Taiko drums are massive coming from Paul, but it's a great Petrify coming from Netroid before Scary D finally takes him down. Captain Twig in trouble as Paul gonna jump in on top of him. A good stun over the wall from Genetics, but not good enough. Benji puts down the enemy jungler, and it's a 2-for-1 in favor of the Tartarus Titans. Yet again, they're not able to get it done. Genetics actually blinks in just to stop the back and delay this backline, but at what cost? Jump in from both Cyclone and Paul. Actually, a great portal gets both sets of beads from the backline of the Titans. Are you kidding me? An innocuous mid lane portal on the ground might just be the MVP from Big Man Tings. 150 on both of those beads going into this next fight.
That feels great. I mean, that feels better than getting the 1 kill, admittedly.
Okay.
Like, I mean, you're going to be now almost guaranteed to lock down either Paul or Cyclone. And again, you have to look at the way that fight goes. You have Captain Twig jumping incredibly deep. And then they get away. They have good peel on the Titans to make sure that Paul doesn't lose his life, Cyclone doesn't lose their life. Well, that's not going to be as easy to do with the beads down. Aga's still standing for them, but 2 minutes now that they have to play without having that security of the CC immunity just built in from the beads. They do still have their ults that might be able to save them some of this. But not a lot of pressure. These 2-for-1s have been, I think, deadlier to anything because they haven't let you get anywhere. And I'm sure it's frustrating for the players at this point because you just know, man, if we could only have done that just a little better, either gotten 1 more kill, made it 3-for-1, or just not lost anybody, we'd have an advantage here. But so far, neither team has really been able to run away with it. I mean, the Kings right now have a massive gold lead.
Scary D picked up, pushed. Potentially stunned coming from Genetics. Actually, stun does not land, but he gets an animosity proc, so we got that going for us, which is nice. Big man Tings finds another portal, this time onto Benji, and Paul's picked up and has to use the Taiko drums. Huge play coming from Variety, and here comes Mystic Rush over the top, but Paul's Aegis is excellent. Taiko drums were good as well, and Paul will escape for the time being. In the meantime, Benji into the backline. Genetics once again needs to turn and peel as Netrioid is getting gunned down by Scary D, and Benji, no help coming either. Actually cancel that. Big man Tings is there, and he'll get them both. Sorry, Netrioid, couldn't save your life, but I got your back, buddy. I'll take them both out on the back end. What a play coming from big man Tings, and that's exactly what they needed. The Camelot Kings may have finally broken this game wide open. Aurora is low and running for his life, but you know Variety's not letting this man escape. He's locked in, and now it's just Paul looking to do what he can. The lone member standing for the Tartarus Titans, and he's actually going to be able to get underneath the tier 2 tower. Tings, still very healthy, but Twig on his last legs. What can the Camelot Kings do? No Hunter for 25 on Scary D's respawn, and Variety low on mana. It's Paul and a dream, a quadra kill looming in his eyes as Driving Strike does not land. The Camelot Kings finally work down the mid Phoenix. Ting steps up, but decides better against it. The Kings have not gotten the EFG. They will not get the EFG, at least for the moment, but they did at least crack the base. Mid Phoenix now down on the Tartarus Titan side of the map.
The minute they win that fight, pings start coming out. They recognize they had a full minion wave rushing that tier 2 tower. There we go. You know what? We have not been able to get aggressive the way we want to. Let's take some control of the map and do something with it. And I mean, that's exactly what you need. The biggest thing I've been noticing outside of the fact that BMT is just nuts. Like, look, this was a, what, 7th pick, 8th pick, 6th pick. There we go. Numbers that comes through for the Giannis. I mean, he's right after the bans, makes it through all 10. We haven't seen a lot of them this week because of the nerfs that he received in the bonus patch that they're playing on, but I don't know, 8-4-8 seems pretty good to me.
Yeah, I mean, he's made it work for sure, and now he's got a 3K pot in his pocket, and
that seems good.
And he has used it, and that's a lot of damage that you're going to have to deal with, and you just watched him nearly one-tap Benji. Benji rocking all of 30 dedicated magical protections, thanks to that wing blade. Not a whole lot to speak of, and he felt it on the back end of that last unstable vortex on that replay. But the Kings, once again, now at least have Oni minions, particularly this Oni Fire Wave in the mid lane, but it meets in an awkward position for the Titans because they can easily come in and start to whittle this away. It won't be easy for Benji to clear it, but he can do so given enough time. The Kings don't seem able to really threaten the FG enough in the meantime. Side waves with these Oni waves, so far from their objectives, I don't think they're going to be enough to take down these towers, and even if they take down the towers, certainly not the Phoenixes. And in 42 minutes, you're not losing sleep over losing a tier 2 at this point in the game. Scary D just stepped into traffic and nearly got flattened. 60% of his HP gone, courtesy of one unstable vortex. His Variety is going for the kill, but he can't quite find it. And now the Tartarus Titans have to make him pay. Finally, the Man Mountain falls, but the FG's getting low on the backside. Benji trying to do it, but he can't. It's the Camelot Kings who get the enhanced Fire Giant, and now they're going to try and turn and run, get away, escape with this on 4 members of their team, and they will be successful in that endeavor. Variety finally falls. Finally, one of the members of the Camelot Kings front line dies, but they get an EFG for that trade.
Worth it, I think,
Yes.
overall. And you had mentioned not crying necessarily over tier 2s. I don't know if you lose one, maybe you don't scoff at it. You lose both of them and the EFG. Now all of a sudden you're a little more worried about it. Those fire minions just outside your Phoenix line as well in mid. So this is a big opening opportunity for the Kings. The first one I think they've really been able to run away with in a little while. And that 10,000 gold, I mean, normally 43 minutes in, you're not talking about it mattering too much, but they've been able to sell off all of their boots. They've been able to afford those 3K pots, the power potions, all that they're going to be able to use to win some of these engagements. It's just where they want to go. They've used about a minute of this FG so far. And the minions were what got the tier 2s. That wasn't even them. Now it's up to the Titans, who are surprisingly far out of base.
Well, yeah, they're grouped up. They're trying to set up the ambush here. Paul is on mid-wave, and I think that would trigger some alarm bells if I'm the Camelot Kings. They are stepping up with some trepidation, some respect to where the Tartarus Titans could be, and now Captain Twig will see. But this is exactly where they want him. Look at where Variety's going. He's upgraded his teleport, and he's going to get behind him. But Aurora wants to start the fight now while Variety's out of position. Through space and time does not do quite enough. And now Twig is in trouble. Remember, no purification beats for him. But Paul has been jumped on by Variety and Genetics. I called him D-Generation X earlier, and they are trying to chase him down. But a great assassinate on the backline gets both backliners. But Netrioid is undeterred. Double kill for him as Scary D has fallen. And all of a sudden, this game's starting to slip away from the Tartarus Titans. Paul falls to Genetics, and Variety's right there with him. He's got 2 words for Paul, is he's on the respawn now, 68 seconds before he's back. Tings is going to clean up Benji, and that is it, barring a Cyclone Spin miracle play, but he is about 6 consonants away from where he needs to be. Variety's going to let him know exactly what he thinks about his attempt, and the Tartarus Titans will fall 2-0 to the Camelot Kings.
I was going to say, obligatory Cyclone Spin has the most pentakills in the SPL, but that doesn't mean much since I think it's been 5 seasons since we've really gotten to see any of them. Yeah, this is just clean play. The Kings, I mean, I guess clean play is not even the best word to describe it. It was a lot of 2-for-1s, like you said, 3-for-2s, 4-for-3s, I think was the best one that we really got to see. A lot of trades that just leave nobody ahead, but the Kings just kept grinding a little bit of gold each time. It was, you know, hey, we're up 1,000, we're up 1,500. Now we're up 3,000, now we're up 3,500, 4,000 after that fight, to the point where now they finally get themselves well over 10K at the end there, but it all comes down to just that last fight.
Mifflin, this was so long ago. Do you owe people money now? Is that what that bet was? I can't remember. Oh, you don't want to talk anymore. Oh, Mifflin, he's busy, guys. He'll be on the desk. There. Maybe, I don't know. It was 43 minutes ago. I can't remember if Mifflin was putting money on the Kings or not.
$5.
All I know is the Kings have walked away with a 2-0 victory. Congratulations to them. We'll be right back as Mifflin gets ready to pay up or something. I don't remember. I don't know.
Genetics. Who needs good ping when you got mechanics like that between Kings and Genetics?
It never gets me down. City of mine. How I love
Hello and welcome back to the SMITE Pro League powered by Alienware. And chat, I think we all know what just happened in this set. We all just became rich together, collectively speaking, thanks to this man of the hour, Mifflin. A little bit more, yeah, don't be stingy, keep on paying it up. All right, Dolson came to collect, and I'll be getting mine right after this death segment. Don't you worry about that. But for you guys in chat, you can make sure to spend that money that Mifflin owes all of you over at shop.smiteproleague.com. Make sure to pick up some of the SMITE Pro player gear and get some nice stuff for your at-home comfort, at-home, game days around. You've all just made money off of Mifflin, so I know you guys have got it to spend here at the shop.smiteproleague.com. Friendly reminder that all of your pro player apparel can be found there, and there's some new pieces that have been added to the collections as of recently, and we already talked about the fact that Mifflin owes up. We're going to let Aggro make sure to collect like we ever had a doubt. Yeah, Mifflin, again, make sure all 5 are on that table. Okay, Aggro, glad that you finished up. Gore, would you like to step up next and go ahead and collect your reward?
I'm not going to have any left for chat.
Well, you're going to have to find it, Mifflin. This is your fault, Mifflin.
All right, chat, look at me. This one's for you guys. You could just come get your money. I don't even want it, dude. Taco, you can pick it up with chat too.
No, you're gonna get that for me. I promise. We'll make sure to collect. Okay. The rest of the chat will be able to get theirs as well at some point in time. Yeah, you might as well just take some of the freebies that are coming with. But getting back on topic, as you all can tell, there was not a Game 3 to take place here between the Camelot Kings and the Tartarus Titans, although this one did stretch the distance, went a little bit longer just to get Mifflin's hopes up, I'm sure. Camelot Kings definitely doing their part, chat, for all of us here today. And with this 2-0, I think it's important to mention Mifflin. Genetics, variety, definitely shining frontline members here in this set.
We got mega frontline diffed. And when I say we, I'm talking about me and the Tartarus Titans this time. I feel like I get to be an honorary member if I'm going to be bankrolling all their bets going forward. But look, at the end of the day, what happened? Scary D thought he was a frontliner still at points, got absolutely decimated, and then at the end of the game, the Tartarus Titans go for one crazy Hail Mary play, set up an ambush in the jungle. They get spotted out in the jungle. They stay there for 30 more seconds and then get completely surrounded not only by a Yanis ult, but a TP from a Hercules. Tough going, man. Just tough one.
And what makes this so much more difficult for the Tartarus Titans is that there were definitely strong picks that took place for them that opened up some small opportunities. Unfortunately, they just did not have the damage that they needed in order to actually take down that enhanced fire giant. Camelot Kings as well, playing the patience game, understanding that they have this global ultimate of the through space and time to constantly threaten the Tartarus Titans should they try to pick up on those objectives, Mifflin. And that's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't situation here for the Titans. Have to feel for them a little bit in game 2 because they definitely found their picks. They had their moments. It's just not enough to actually take an objective after the fact.
No, the damage output wasn't quite there. Enough to shut down Harry Coming. That's Variety, by the way, just absolutely decimating that entire match. How many times did a Fire Giant dance start? Variety walked in alone, said, use all your abilities, I dare you, and then full heals off Hercules' third ability. Too many times to count. I'm sure that everyone in the building and maybe the surrounding buildings heard me screaming from the green room. It was a hard match to watch, but maybe a great one for the Smite fans at home.
May have been a little bit more personal investment on your end than the rest of us, though, Mifflin. But with the rest of the schedule breaking out after that set debut, Tartarus Titans, Camelot Kings, Titans do take that, or excuse me, Camelot Kings do take that with the 2-0 series. Jade Dragons versus the Solar Scarabs are going to be up next, and that's bound to be another relatively interesting matchup between these two teams because we've seen a lot of things from the Scarabs, we've seen a lot of things from the Dragons, and I'm certain the Dragons are going to be the favorites, but we've got to talk a little bit more about what happened here in this Camelot King set, Mifflin, and more importantly, we've already mentioned Variety a few times over, and for good reason. We've actually got Variety right now to join us for the post-game interview, and Variety, we saw it all between that Hercules action. How much fun were you actually having playing the Herc there?
A lot of fun, as you could tell when I entered the second game at the speed buff, but you know, that's just, you got to get one into game in, so yeah.
It's just a classic trade, really, if you think about it. But more importantly, Variety, it's already come home for the Kings. But is it
Yeah.
coming home for you guys? Is this just foreshadowing for the inevitable?
I hope so. I mean, I did miss the first England goal because we were still playing the game, so that's unfortunate. But hopefully, Godgate can, hold on to the lead and bring it home for the boys.
Well, you've already done your part, I think, for your home country, and I'm sure that it's going to be a very fun rest of the day for you and Tings at the very least. So you guys make sure to enjoy the rest of your day. Congratulations on the set win, and thanks for showing us all how to actually hit Herc 2s, because God only knows we all need that assistance.
Yep, no problem. It's been my pleasure.
Variety.
Have a good one, Ari. But for real, chat, I'm serious. It's kind of tough to hit those Hercules 2s, but make sure that you guys stay tuned because we still have the Jade Dragons versus the Solar Scarabs coming up next, so we'll be right back.